marks on it. Whether it was large planets, dwarf planets, asteroids, stars, or interstellar dust, all were affected by this war. The terrain of the large planets was altered, with the crust being directly damaged, leading to increased volcanic and seismic activity. Dwarf planets had their shells stripped away, requiring hundreds of thousands of years to regain a spherical shape. Asteroids were directly shattered, and the war between the two civilizations even created several new asteroid belts within this star system. The elemental structure of interstellar dust was also changed, now containing many heavy metal elements. The atmospheric structure of the star was altered as well, and the star entered an active phase ahead of schedule. Even millions of years later, civilizations arriving in this star system would be able to perceive the traces left by these wars. This was the strength of the fleet under Marshal Lewent. However, despite this, Marshal Lewent still could not win the war, nor did he gain any advantage. His opponent, the fleet of the Blue Moon civilization, possessed similar strength. Days of exhausting efforts, strategic planning by tens of thousands of advisors, and hundreds of large supercomputing centers only allowed Marshal Lewent's fleet to achieve a stalemate. Neither side lost, nor did either side win. It seemed that in this battle, the only true loser was this star system itself. This conflict made Marshal Lewent deeply aware, and he confirmed that the opposing commander also recognized that the Blue Moon civilization and the Southern Star civilization were indeed evenly matched. For either side to win seemed nearly impossible. Continuing to fight would likely lead to mutual destruction with no other possible outcome. Thus, resolving the ownership of the Wangliang star system through negotiation, jointly developing it, and sharing the benefits appeared to be the only option. While both civilizations lowered their flags and recuperated, waiting for further results, they secretly prepared for a renewed conflict, ready to fight again at any moment, as no one could predict whether the situation would undergo any unforeseen changes. At this moment, trillions of kilometers away, the human fleet was still in the slow process of deceleration. During this time, Chen Yu had been closely monitoring the changes occurring in the Wangliang star system. Although the distance is too far to truly feel the intensity of that war, Chen Yu can still perceive the magnitude of it through some clues. The material from the large planet has been blasted into space, and perhaps even the crust has been destroyed. This large planet is unlikely to remain stable in the future. With the addition of 3 asteroid belts, it seems that a certain dwarf planet or a larger asteroid has been directly destroyed. The brightness of the stars has even increased. After this battle between two great civilizations, the environment in the Wangliang 3-star system must be akin to purgatory. Is this the strength of two established third-tier civilizations? Is this the kind of destruction that a third-tier civilization can inflict on the natural environment of a star system at full capacity? At this moment, Chen Yu genuinely felt the power of these two third-tier civilizations. Indeed, as an established third-tier civilization, their technological and military strength is not something he can compare to at this stage. However, at this moment, Chen Yu still felt a strong confidence in victory. Chapter 147, Dull Gold. At this moment, the human fleet was nearing the VELS 0350565 star system. Although its ultimate goal was the Wangliang 3-star system, it was not planning to head there directly, but rather to make a stopover in this star system. The VELS 0350565 star system is only about 0.6 light-years away from Chen Yu's ultimate goal, the Wangliang 3-star system. This close distance has led some researchers to believe that the Wangliang 3-star system is not actually a binary system, but should include the VELS 0350565 star, making it a 3-star system. To illustrate, in the well-known Nanmen 2 3-star system, the most famous star, Proxima Centauri, is also the closest star to the Sun, located about 0.21 light-years from the other two stars. The distance of 0.21 light-years is comparable to 0.6 light-years, as they are in the same order of magnitude. Although Proxima Centauri is 0.21 light-years away from the other two stars, all 3 stars still revolve around each other due to their gravitational relationship, which is why they are regarded as a unit and collectively referred to as Nanmen 2. According to this reasoning, the VELS 0350565 star and the Wangliang binary star system might also be considered a whole, forming a 3-star system. However, after detailed observation, Chen Yu rejected this view. He believed that there is no gravitational relationship between the VELS 0350565 star and the 2 stars of the Wangliang 3-star system. They merely pass by each other by chance. After a long period, the distance between them will only increase, ultimately leading to complete separation. These two are independent entities with no gravitational connection and cannot be regarded as a single unit. The VELS 0350565 star is a brown dwarf. Brown dwarfs can be considered incomplete stars. Their mass is too small to sustain hydrogen fusion in their cores and can only carry out deuterium or lithium fusion. This results in their surface temperatures being extremely low, possibly only a few hundred degrees Celsius. Compared to the temperature of 6,000 degrees Celsius on the surface of the Sun, this temperature is negligible. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, with a mass 318 times that of Earth. It is indeed a substantial giant among planets, but it is insignificant when compared to stars. Even a brown dwarf, which is considered a failed star, has a mass between 13 to 80 times that of Jupiter. In contrast, the Sun has a mass 1,047 times that of Jupiter. The star Y03505658 is one such brown dwarf. Its mass, as measured by Chunyu, is confirmed to be 46 times that of Jupiter, 1.46 million times that of Earth, and 0.044 times that of the Sun. Although its mass is much greater than Jupiter's, its volume is only slightly larger, making them nearly the same size. This implies that its density exceeds that of Jupiter by a considerable margin. Surrounding this brown dwarf is an ice giant with a mass roughly equivalent to that of Neptune. This ice giant, in turn, is orbited by numerous rocky satellites, which are not smaller than Jupiter's moons in the solar system. Chunyu's ultimate goal is to explore these satellites of the ice giant. At this moment, after years of gradual deceleration, the massive human civilization fleet has finally arrived in the vicinity of this brown dwarf. Cautiously, the human fleet did not enter the star system directly. Chunyu first dispatched several small reconnaissance satellites and probes to thoroughly survey the star system, confirming the absence of other forces before truly entering. Indeed, even though the Wangliang star system is only 0.6 light-years away, it is embroiled in conflict. While the Wei star system, a shorthand for the Y03505658 system, remains largely unvisited, with not a single ship having arrived here. Chunyu had already gathered this intelligence through Outwa, which is why he set the final destination here. The reason for the lack of interest in this system is quite simple: it lacks value. Level 3 civilizations do not place much importance on more primitive resources, such as gold, silver, copper, iron, tin, aluminum, zinc, and carbon. These resources are abundant, with many systems possessing them in excess. What Level 3 civilizations value are rarer compounds. These compounds are extremely difficult to manufacture artificially, have very low yields, yet have wide-ranging applications. They usually form over long periods in special environments through unique mechanisms. For example, a substance called tholins commonly exists on cold, distant dwarf planets. It is formed from simple organic compounds like methane and ethane, which are transformed by ultraviolet radiation. Tholins are a type of copolymer, not a simple compound, lacking a definite chemical formula or a corresponding mixture. Tholins cannot form on Earth, and producing them through technological and chemical means is challenging. To obtain this substance in large quantities, one must find ways to mine it on cold dwarf planets far from stars. Of course, this substance, tolin, has little use aside from being burned. However, there are other special compounds or copolymers that, like tolin, require specific environments and mechanisms for artificial production and can only be extracted from nature, yet they hold significant value. For instance, there is a crucial material for technology at the third civilization stage, referred to as dull metal by the Southern Star Civilization, which is widely used in deep space exploration radar's photosensitive components, key circuits of large supercomputers, ion thruster nozzles, the inner walls of high-efficiency nuclear fusion reactors, and internal circuits of long-distance communication devices, among others. Dull metal is likely a copolymer formed by certain metal elements and organic substances under specific conditions, similar to tolin in that it does not have a clear molecular formula or corresponding mixture. At this moment, Chunyu has also entered the third civilization stage and has a corresponding demand for dull metal. To obtain it, he developed a very complex preparation route, which involved considerable effort and maneuvering, resulting in an annual output of only about 1,000 tons, far from sufficient. In fact, the shortage of dull metal and other compounds or copolymers has begun to affect the speed of Chunyu's industrial development. In a binary star system, some distant, cold planets orbiting both stars can naturally form rich deposits of dull metal beneath their ice layers due to the periodic exposure to different types of light and radiation from the two stars. Thanks to natural mechanisms and long periods of time, the Wangliang Trinary system is one such binary star system, where two planets orbit around the two stars. Chunyu knows that this is the real reason for the conflict between the Southern Star Civilization and the Blue Moon Civilization in the Wangliang Trinary system. Chapter 148. Construction. In contrast to the Wangliang Trinary system, the VA system has no resources worth competing for at the third civilization level. Basic elements like gold, silver, copper, iron, calcium, zinc, selenium, or fusion fuel. The Wangliang Trinary system has plenty of those, available for direct extraction, making it unnecessary to come to the VA system. Building an industrial base to produce primary industrial goods? The VA system is neither too far nor too close to the Wangliang Trinary system. Establishing an industrial base here would be very difficult to defend and prone to disturbances. It would be better to build it in a location farther from the battlefield, such as the solar system or the Southern Gate binary system. Considering all of this, the two major civilizations involved in the conflict have coincidentally abandoned the VA system. Aside from periodic monitoring, they haven't even sent a fleet here. At this stage, with both major civilizations showing intentions for peace talks and the war nearing its end, the VA system is even more neglected, so much so that they are too lazy to send monitoring satellites here. Chen Yu has already grasped this intelligence in advance. However, he still thoroughly observed the VA system to ensure he wouldn't alert anyone before cautiously entering and halting in orbit around one of the moons near VB. At this moment, having traversed a distance of over 10 light years and crossed decades of time, the human fleet finally settled in this previously unfamiliar galaxy. Looking at the massive gas giant, almost the size of Neptune, shimmering with a light blue hue, and observing the distant dark red-brown dwarf, Chen Yu felt a wave of emotions. Who would have thought that my first interstellar voyage would be right next to the battlefield of two other civilizations, where I would personally partake in a real interstellar war? Yes, the reason Chen Yu came to this galaxy was to prepare for future involvement in the war. If possible, I would prefer to hide quietly in a galaxy, developing in peace, avoiding any provocations, and hoping no one would trouble me. Unfortunately, the realities of the environment compel me to take the initiative, to actively engage in disputes and wars. Otherwise, it would be my own demise. With that in mind, there was nothing more to say. The Star Alliance, I am committed. The Wangliang 3-star system, it is mine. The precious resources in the galaxy belong to me. The Southern Star Civilization or the Blue Moon Civilization. One of you will also belong to me. Come join human civilization and contribute to my technological development. Chen Yu, along with Mo Zhua, Ao Duo, and others, repeatedly simulated and calculated, ultimately drafting an extensive follow-up development plan. At this moment, settling in the galaxy is just the first step of the plan. What a vibrant galaxy this is. Through the telescope, observing everything in this galaxy, watching as countless trillions of small asteroids moved chaotically, colliding with each other. Chen Yu noted how these asteroids continuously bombarded the nearby planet and its moons, as well as the brown dwarf itself. Each significant impact could trigger an eruption on the brown dwarf, filling Chen Yu with reflections. The early formation of this galaxy bears some resemblance to that of another galaxy. Back then, there was also chaos, with trillions of asteroids moving erratically, colliding without any stable orbits. It was only after the 8 major planets formed and cleared their orbits that some asteroids were expelled from the solar system, while others formed the asteroid belt and the Kuiper belt, establishing relatively stable orbits. A portion of the asteroids merged together, leading to the relative stability of the solar system. During that time, asteroid impacts of a scale similar to, or even larger than those that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs occurred daily on Earth. Moreover, some scientists even suspect that part of the moon originated from Earth. They believe that a massive planet collided directly with Earth, creating a large crater, which is now the Pacific Ocean. The debris from that impact eventually coalesced in space due to gravitational forces, forming the moon. The power of that collision is unimaginable. The chaotic period of the solar system has passed. However, the journey for this galaxy to reach a similar stage is still a long way off. Amidst this chaos, Chen Yu began to take action quietly and discreetly. The reason for this discretion was to ensure safety and avoid the risk of being detected by certain civilizations. Millions of three-eyed beings were already mobilized and ready to respond to Chen Yu's call, engaging in vigorous construction efforts. Under these circumstances, billions of robots and millions of three-eyed beings, under Chen Yu's unified command, rushed to various satellites of a designated planet to commence construction simultaneously. Tens of thousands of spacecraft of various classes transformed into transport vessels, connecting dozens of different satellites. A large number of construction machinery and resources were to dock Yongji, Xinglinge, Gongdi Drisha, and the construction began with great momentum. In just 1 year, these satellites underwent significant changes. Hundreds of thousands of basic factories were completed, including mines, energy plants, metal smelting factories, metal processing plants, foundries, robotic factories, and many others. However, the changes were only noticeable from the ground or at close range. From a distance, the terrain, temperature, and color of these satellites remained in their original state, showing no signs of human activity on the surface. This was due to Chen Yu's strict concealment plan established at the outset of construction. Factories that could be built underground were constructed underground, and those that had to be on the surface were equipped with special concealment structures. Even the heat generated was dissipated underground rather than on the surface. In the long term, this would lead to a rise in the planet's temperature and changes in its geography. But that was a concern for hundreds or thousands of years in the future and not worth considering at this moment. Even the unavoidable waste gases were frozen at low temperatures and buried deep underground, leaving no trace on the surface and not altering the planet's spectrum or atmospheric structure. This was quite complicated and tedious, implying significant engineering costs. Ordinary civilizations would find this nearly impossible, but for Chunyu, it merely required more computational power. With the basic industrial infrastructure completed, Chunyu immediately began the second phase of construction, the establishment of a spy satellite factory. In Chapter 149, titled Massive Project, Chunyu planned to produce a fixed model of a spy detection satellite. In his design, this satellite would be roughly spherical, about 10 centimeters in diameter, similar in size to a large apple, and equipped with 4 antennae resembling toothpicks. This small device weighed around 10 kilograms. Its structure was simple and its functionality singular. Even a secondary civilization could manufacture it. Given that human civilization had effectively reached a tertiary level, creating this satellite posed no difficulty. Moreover, Chunyu optimized the structure and manufacturing process of the spy detection satellite using tertiary civilization technology, significantly reducing the complexity of production and minimizing the need for special materials. It is possible to produce this using only some common elements and compounds, with production costs and difficulties reduced to an unprecedented low. Moreover, Chunyu's construction tasks in the designated star system primarily focus on building this simple type of spy detection satellite. Aside from some necessary adjustments, there is essentially no waste of computational power and resources in other areas. Under these circumstances, it is foreseeable just how terrifying Chunyu's production capacity for these spy detection satellites will be. However, despite the planned production tasks ahead, Chunyu still feels a surge of emotions. Although these spy detection satellites are simple to manufacture, have a straightforward structure, and are inexpensive, all these advantages are negated by one factor: quantity. Indeed, quantity. The number of these simple spy detection satellites Chunyu intends to produce is not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even billions, but an astonishing 100 billion billion. Each satellite weighs 10 kilograms, or 0.01 tons. The total weight of 100 billion such satellites would amount to 100 trillion tons. To put this in perspective, before Earth was destroyed, the total mass of the entire Earth's atmosphere was only about 515 trillion tons. The gases that make up the atmosphere create all the winds, rain, thunder, and lightning on Earth. They form a thick layer that envelopes the planet, producing countless beautiful scenes and incredible weather phenomena. The combined mass of all the gases in the Earth's atmosphere is just a little over half of this weight. This represents a colossal project that is unimaginable for any level 3 or even level 4 civilization. Faced with such a production demand, even a level 4 civilization would struggle to sustain it. Yet, Chunyu resolutely embarked on this task, fully confident in his ability to complete it. He must accomplish this enormous and unimaginable construction task because he intends to undertake something that no civilization at any level would dare to consider, or even think of at all. Chunyu plans to cut off the entire communication link of the designated star system to the outside world. Only by severing this communication link can he proceed with his subsequent plans, smoothly integrate into the Alliance system, and, with the protection of the Alliance, achieve his own development. The reality of the situation requires Chunyu to accomplish this in order to gain some degree of control over the future of his survival. However, cutting off the communication link of an entire star system is an extremely challenging task. In fact, ordinary civilizations would not even contemplate it. Any rational person, after a simple calculation, would realize that such a feat is virtually impossible. Civilizations at level 3 and above generally use advanced communication technologies as their means of communication. The designated civilization and the neighboring civilization are no exception. Chunyu's communication range, aided by the advancements in mathematics and science during this journey, has expanded to about 180 billion kilometers, or approximately 0.019 light years. The communication length of the designated civilization is about 0.1 light years. Exceeding this distance necessitates the establishment of communication relay stations to transmit information segment by segment, enabling communication to extend far beyond the established range. This is akin to the civilization of the Southern Star. The Southern Star system is approximately 27 light-years away from a certain star system. Theoretically, by setting up 270 communication relay stations within this distance at the frontline command center of the aforementioned star system, real-time communication with the headquarters of the Southern Star civilization could be maintained. Of course, this is merely theoretical. In reality, the number of communication relay stations would be far greater, potentially by thousands or even tens of thousands. These relay stations would be located in various places based on different communication needs and the interstellar environment, employing different disguises and serving as backups to ensure the security and stability of the entire communication chain. Communication is a crucial element in interstellar warfare. To some extent, severing communication between the front line and the rear is tantamount to achieving victory in that war. So, why don't both sides in an interstellar conflict attempt to cut off each other's communication links to secure victory? The only possible reason for not pursuing such a highly beneficial strategy is that it is simply unfeasible. The reality is that the universe is far too vast and empty. One side cannot possibly search every corner of interstellar space to locate and destroy the enemy's communication relay stations within that space. For instance, at this moment, the long-distance communication technology of the Southern Star Civilization and the Blue Moon Civilization are roughly equal, both extending to 0.1 light-years. To completely sever the communication link between the opposing civilization and its rear, it would be necessary to locate and destroy all of the enemy's communication relay stations within a radius of at least 0.1 light-year. This must be done comprehensively. Not a single station can remain, because even if you destroy 10,000, leaving just one, that remaining relay station can still perform its communication relay function, rendering the entire operation meaningless. The communication distance limit for both the Southern Star and Blue Moon civilizations is 0.1 light-year. If all communication relay stations within that 0.1 light-year range are destroyed, it is evident that the communication link is severed. Additional relay stations elsewhere would be of no use. It is akin to a 10,000-kilometer-long railway being interrupted by just 1 meter. That single meter of interruption is enough to render the entire railway inoperable. So, how difficult is it to locate and destroy all communication relay stations within that 0.1 light-year range? The answer is that it is so difficult that it is practically impossible. It is a challenge that ordinary third-tier civilizations, and even more advanced civilizations, would not even consider, let alone attempt. If someone were to propose this as a goal, anyone would deem them a madman. However, now, Xinyu intends to achieve this task. Chapter 150. Terrifying engineering capability. The universe is far too vast and empty. Taking the 2 stars of the aforementioned star system as the core and constructing a sphere with a radius of 0.1 light-year can be viewed as the core area of the battlefield. The 2 parties engaged in combat here are essentially unable to carry out communication relay station search and destruction missions. To accomplish this task, a more realistic plan is to use the 2 stars of the Wangliang triple star system as the core, extending outward by 0.2 light-years to create a sphere, and then subtracting the core sphere of 0.1 light-years to form a shell-like region, destroying all communication relay stations within this 0.1 light-year thick shell. Through simple calculations, the volume of this shell region can be determined by taking the volume of a sphere with a radius of 0.2 light-years and subtracting the volume of a sphere with a radius of 0.1 light-years. This number is approximately 0.0293 cubic light-years, which translates to about 261,037 cubic kilometers. This figure is indeed so large that it becomes difficult to visualize. Taking the cube root gives a number of approximately 2,961,012. This volume is roughly equivalent to a cube with a side length of 2,961,012 kilometers. 2,961,012 kilometers is about 2.96 trillion kilometers, or approximately 0.31 light-years. To search for all the communication relay stations, which have been deliberately concealed by the enemy, within such an expansive area, how many detectors would be needed? How many factories would be required to produce such a quantity of detectors? And how much manpower and resources would be necessary for such a vast number of detectors? Simply thinking about it makes it clear that this task is virtually impossible. Therefore, in interstellar warfare, neither side would consider this scheme. However, Xinyu intends to attempt what ordinary civilizations cannot achieve. Moreover, to be prudent, he has even increased the difficulty of the task. Xinyu aims to designate a 0.2 light-year radius area centered around the 2 stars of the Wangliang triple star system as a danger zone, and then, also using this as the core, extend outward by 0.4 light-years to search for and destroy all communication relay stations within the 0.2 light-year thick shell region. Your super-distance communication limit is 0.1 light-years, so I will destroy all your communication relay stations within a range of 0.2 light-years. This way, it becomes even more secure, right? Even if you have many means, you won't be able to establish communication channels in a short time, right? However, this approach means that the volume of the area Xinyu needs to search increases to approximately 0.2346 cubic light-years, which is more than 8 times greater than the 0.0293 cubic light-years in the simpler plan. But that's okay. Xinyu is well prepared mentally. With his full effort, the basic industrial facilities have now been completed. Countless raw minerals have been refined and sent to the metal casting factories, where they are transformed into various parts through assembly lines. The The components produced by hundreds of thousands of large factories provide sufficient raw materials for the assembly factories of the spy detection satellites. Within these assembly factories, these components are turned into microsatellites, each weighing 10 kilograms. In the A-star system, Chunyu has constructed a staggering 2 million assembly factories, 2 million large-scale assembly plants, hundreds of thousands of mines, metallurgy factories, casting factories, component factories, and fusion power plants. Such immense industrial strength would leave any civilization in awe, unable to breathe. At this moment, the nearly 3 million various factories have a single mission: to produce simple, small, and lightweight reconnaissance satellites with all their might. The productivity potential is unimaginable. Within these large assembly factories, each factory boasts up to 2,000 production lines. Each production line can produce approximately 12 of these reconnaissance satellites every second. In 1 hour, a single production line can produce 320 units, which translates to about 37 million in a day. With 2,000 production lines in one factory, that amounts to roughly 27 billion satellites per day. Across 2 million large assembly factories, that's approximately 410 trillion satellites in a single day, and around 15 quintillion in a year. Such terrifying output is enough to astonish any intelligent life. This is the capability that Chunyu has mastered after integrating computers and harnessing immense computational power, merging human intellect with mechanical calculations. About 3 million three-eyed individuals have also dedicated themselves to this work, giving their all and working tirelessly. However, in overall calculations, their contributions amount to less than 1/10,000th of Chunyu's current total production, barely significant. Chunyu is not overly concerned about this. In his view, when it comes to such mechanized, streamlined manufacturing tasks devoid of technical complexity, he has a natural advantage, while intelligent life has an inherent disadvantage. The primary role of intelligent life should be in innovation and exploration, and in technological development. Nonetheless, since they are willing to participate, and such involvement can genuinely enhance their sense of honor and loyalty, Chunyu allows it to continue. However, he does not intend to disclose the specific contribution ratios to the general public, as it could be demoralizing and diminish their motivation to strive. Under these circumstances, a massive, astronomical, number of reconnaissance satellites are being produced continuously. Once produced, the next step is deployment. Given the sheer volume of satellites, deploying them using ships is clearly impractical. Each satellite weighs 10 kilograms, so 100 million satellites would amount to 100,000 tons. And 100 quintillion would equal 100 trillion tons. No amount of heavy transport ships could suffice. Having journeyed from the solar system, Chunyu's fleet of heavy transport ships had only managed to carry about 1.2 billion tons of supplies, a number that pales in comparison to the current figures. The contrast in numbers made Chunyu acutely aware. His type of existence can only exert maximum effectiveness in resource-rich environments. In the vastness of interstellar space, where there are no villages or shops, having strength is futile. This further solidified his determination to seek a star system where he could develop in peace. At this moment, Chunyu decided to deploy measures using an electromagnetic accelerator. Based on the same technological principles as an electromagnetic cannon, he intended to manufacture special models of electromagnetic cannons that could launch these spy satellites into the vicinity of a specific star system, allowing them to decelerate and arrange themselves for search operations autonomously. Of course, this required Chunyu's direct control. He needed to establish a communication link in the vastness of space, similar to what was done by other advanced civilizations. The maximum limit for the superluminal communication distance that Chunyu's current mathematical capabilities could achieve was approximately 0.0019 light-years. The distance from the specific star system to another star system was 0.6 light-years, meaning that theoretically, only about 32 superluminal communication relay stations would be needed to achieve real-time communication between the two locations. However, in reality, Chunyu would not push things to such extremes. If any relay station encountered a malfunction or an unexpected event, the entire communication link would be severed. A more feasible plan was for Chunyu to deploy over 10,000 relay stations, each following different distances and routes, positioned in various locations. This way, even if 9,000 relay stations were destroyed due to unforeseen circumstances, the remaining stations would still be able to meet communication needs. Under normal circumstances, Chunyu would maintain communication through the optimal route, utilizing about 60 relay stations. Superluminal communication based on quantum entanglement does not require time, but the electronic components of the relay stations need some time to operate and compute. On average, each relay station would add about 36 milliseconds of communication delay. Thus, with 60 relay stations, the communication delay would amount to 216 milliseconds. This delay was still acceptable. somewhat similar to the lag experienced during less smooth online gaming in earlier times, which Yu could barely tolerate. Continuing to develop mathematics to seek greater communication distances and optimizing the performance of relay stations to reduce individual station delay times were two directions in which Yu focused his efforts. However, these were long-term endeavors, and there was no rush to achieve immediate results. At this moment, these relay stations were being deployed directly into space. With their own propulsion systems, they began swiftly flying towards their designated relay positions between the specific star system and another star system. Upon reaching their predetermined locations, these relay stations would discard their thrusters and rely solely on their weak propulsion systems for maneuvering. At that time, the size of these relay stations would shrink to about 10 cubic meters, roughly the size of a large sphere with a diameter of approximately 27 meters. The surfaces of these large spheres were coated with high-absorption materials, ensuring very low reflectivity for both radio waves and visible light, thus providing relatively good stealth capabilities. Due to technological limitations, the density of the communication relay stations Yu deployed was nearly dozens of times that of other advanced civilizations. Correspondingly, the probability of his relay stations being detected was also dozens of times higher. Considering the technological gap, this probability could be elevated to perhaps 100 or 200 times greater. Even so, Yu was not worried at all that his relay station would be discovered by other forces in interstellar space. The reason was simple. When a task is sufficiently difficult, even if it were simplified by 100 times, it would still be extremely challenging and nearly impossible to accomplish. As the communication relay station began deployment and moved towards a certain star system, the launch of simple spy detection satellites also commenced. For this mission, Yu had constructed hundreds of thousands of specialized electromagnetic deployment devices. Creating these devices was not particularly difficult, at least much less complex than the technology behind electromagnetic energy cannons. In comparison, the energy supply requirements were greater and more complicated, but that was not a major concern. Next to Yu was a gas giant. Although the elemental structure of this gas giant differed from planets like Jupiter and Saturn, it was still primarily composed of hydrogen. This meant that fusion fuel was virtually limitless, capable of supporting any level of consumption. Each of these electromagnetic deployment devices could launch 3 simple spy detection satellites per second, accelerating them to a speed of 10,000 kilometers per second towards the target star system. Their size was so small that, aside from slight adjustments in orientation and trajectory, they couldn't decelerate at all. However, Yu did not need them to slow down. Maintaining that speed while passing through the star system was also a search process. Why decelerate? At this speed, the first batch of spy detection satellites would arrive at their designated location to begin searching in about 15 years. Each spy detection satellite could search in interstellar space with a radius of 500,000 kilometers. The volume of a sphere with a radius of 500,000 kilometers is approximately 523.6 trillion cubic kilometers. Such vast interstellar space would be searched by just this insignificant little satellite. While this seems incredible, it is not as difficult as it sounds. The interstellar space between stars, with distances ranging from 0 to 4 light-years, is exceptionally sparse, with almost nothing in it. The search target Yu set was not a specific object, but rather macro objects, only searching for items larger than 1 cubic meter. Given the emptiness of interstellar space, there were hardly any such objects. This meant that if something of that size did exist in a certain area, it would be quite simple for the detector to identify it once it approached within a certain distance. Distance was the key factor. The difficulty lay primarily in the vast emptiness of interstellar space. Without a sufficient number of detectors, it would be impossible to search every area and bring all potential macro objects within a distance of 500,000 kilometers. However, through his incredible engineering capabilities, Yu amassed an unimaginable quantity of devices to achieve this. Thus, the subsequent tasks became quite simple. At this moment, over 1 million simple detection satellites were flying towards the target star system every second. Yu precisely controlled the launch angles of the electromagnetic deployment devices, using the weak power supplied by the detection satellites to adjust their layout, ensuring they formed a vast net to thoroughly filter the expansive interstellar space, leaving no gaps. Within the enormous VA star system, millions of factories operated day and night, producing an immense number of spy satellites. These satellites were then transported to the electromagnetic deployment base and launched into space using the deployment devices. Although Yu's efficiency and engineering capabilities were already at an unimaginable level, he knew that to truly complete this task, even he would need nearly a decade. However, at this moment, the engineering tasks in the VA star system were basically complete. The remaining tasks had little technical difficulty and could run automatically. It was time to set off. Looking at the seemingly calm VA star system, which was almost transformed into a mechanical ocean, Chen Yu felt a slight sense of emotion. After a quiet reflection, the vast yet small human fleet set sail, embarking on a journey to the Wangliang star system. Chapter 152. Peace talks. As the human fleet set sail, tens of light years away in the southern star system, a fleet, though not large in scale, was also beginning its journey. This fleet comprised only 100 warships, with 99 being relatively small Nebula-class ships. The flagship of this fleet was merely a Comet-class warship. The most powerful dwarf planet-class ships, capable of influencing an entire battlefield, were not deployed. However, the speaker of the Southern Star Civilization, Bing Yuntian, knew very well that despite the small size of this fleet, every warship was the most advanced model drawn from various major fleets. The soldiers operating these warships were all battle-hardened elites. The value of such elite soldiers could match that of an entire warship. Bing Yuntian was even confident that, at the same technological level, this fleet of 100 warships could defeat an enemy force 3 or even 4 times its size. The entire Southern Star Civilization could not muster a second fleet of this caliber. In the deep space dock, a massive aerospace carrier, the Fire C, also one of the most advanced models with the most powerful performance, quietly docked. Compared to other second-tier aerospace carriers like the Cloud Light and Thundercloud, the comprehensive performance of the Fire C far exceeded them. It had only been in service for 50 years, and all its equipment was at peak performance. The soldiers on board were also an elite force. The 100 warships in this fleet were currently being secured to the aerospace carrier in an orderly manner. On the observation deck of the dock, Bing Yuntian quietly watched the imposing figure of the Southern Star Civilization's military leader, Hejan. "Rest assured, Speaker," Hejan said solemnly. "During the negotiations with the Blue Moon Civilization, I will ensure that we secure the maximum benefits for our civilization." The speaker of the Naxing Civilization, Bing Yuntian, nodded slightly. "We both understand how crucial the resources in the Wangliang Trinary system are for our civilization. With the previous civilization that occupied the Wangliang Trinary system now extinct, this moment of being unclaimed presents the best opportunity for us to seize resources. If we miss this historical chance, we will all be the sinners of our civilization." Hejan's determination to fight for the interests of the Naxing Civilization at all costs grew even stronger. He knew that if they missed this opportunity, it would be nearly impossible for the Naxing Civilization to advance to a level 4 civilization. "Our bottom line is 60 of the total resources in the Wangliang Trinary system. You can assess the specific planetary shares based on the negotiation situation." "Understood. The home system of the Naxing Civilization is slightly closer to Wangliang San, which means the cost of military deployment would be lower than for the Blue Moon Civilization, as both sides continued to hold their ground. This factor greatly increased the chances of the Naxing Civilization achieving final victory. However, it would only be a Pyrrhic victory, not of much value. If the civilization's strength were severely damaged, other civilizations might take advantage of the situation. If they could secure some benefits through negotiation, it would certainly be better than both sides mutually destroying each other." Hejan was about to set off, leading the fleet to the midpoint of both civilizations for negotiations at a red dwarf star system unoccupied by any forces. Although this had already been predetermined and the corresponding precautions were clear, Bing Yuntian still felt a bit anxious and wanted to remind Hejan a few more times. Finally, Hejan entered the main control room of the Hua high-class mothership, carrying Bing Yuntian's earnest expectations. 100 battleships were already secured, and the necessary supplies, machinery, and personnel were in place. Set sail. Intense blue flames erupted from the tail of the Hua high-class mothership, propelling the massive vessel forward. In the main control room, as Hejan watched the dock shrink in the distance and recalled the speaker's earnest instructions, he slowly raised his arm and saluted in the direction of the speaker. "Speaker, please rest assured. On this journey, I, Hejan, will not fail in my mission." Dozens of light years away, in the Blue Moon system, another massive mothership was slowly setting sail towards the Naxing system. In the main control room, the Grand Marshal of the Blue Moon Civilization stood before a screen, where the president of the Blue Moon Civilization crossed his arms over his chest and slowly bowed to his subordinates on the screen. "Marshal Lanxiang, I leave everything to you." Grand Marshal Lanxiang of the Blue Moon Civilization also stood up solemnly, placing his hands over his chest and bowing respectfully to the president on the screen. "President Lydian, please rest assured. On board the deep red mothership, all personnel participating in the negotiations were spirited and full of fighting spirit." Time passed slowly. At this moment, after a journey of over 20 years, the vast yet minuscule human fleet finally arrived near the Wangliang Trinary system. It originally should not have taken this long. However, in order to remain as concealed as possible and to hide the traces of his fleet, Chen Yu not only changed the direction of the exhaust, but also reduced the thrust power. As a result, the speed of travel was affected, and it took more than 20 years to cover a distance of merely 0.6 light years. Nevertheless, it seems that all this preparation was worth it. In the Wangliang triple star system, the two major civilization fleets were still quietly confronting each other, completely unaware that a new fleet was approaching silently from outside the star system. At this moment, the human fleet was about 102.6 billion kilometers from the larger star, Wangliang 3A, and 98.5 billion kilometers from the smaller star, Wangliang 3B. This distance was already close enough, and Qinyu dared not approach any further. Under the cover of the vast universe, Qinyu quietly observed the situation within the star system, contemplating his next move. It seemed that the two civilizations were indeed heading towards peace talks. Since the last conflict, both sides had been in a standoff for over 20 years without any major clashes. If I am not mistaken, the two civilizations have likely begun the negotiation process by now. Perhaps the negotiation teams of both civilizations are meeting at this very moment. Qinyu thought to himself, are they really not going to fight? That can't be right. With both fleets gathered here, not engaging in battle would be such a waste. Since you won't fight, I will add some fuel to the fire. After much deliberation and careful reconnaissance, along with input from military advisors like Aodhua and Majua, he finally made up his mind. Two fleets, each consisting of 1,000 warships, with a Comet-class battleship leading them, quietly set sail, departing from the main force and heading towards different outer planets in the Wangliang triple star system. Chapter 153, The Hall of Peace Gliese 393. As viewed from Earth, is a star located in the constellation Sextans. It is approximately 229 light-years away from the solar system. This star is a red dwarf, with a mass of less than half that of the Sun and an age of up to 10 billion years. It is an ordinary red dwarf, and although it has two planets, one large and one small, orbiting around it with relatively rich resources, it lacks rare compounds like blunt gold and crystal oil films. As a result, this star system has seen almost no visits from civilizations. However, today it welcomes some visitors. 2 transport ships and 3 engineering ships arrived here ahead of the spacecraft carrier piloted by the military leader of the Southern Star civilization, Heijun. Some pre-assembled machinery was directly deployed onto one of the large planets, and numerous Southern Star engineers began to operate these machines. Soon, a preliminary base began to take shape. The engineers utilized local materials to rapidly construct a series of facilities, including a fusion power plant, a machining factory, an assembly plant, and a launch base. In addition to these civilian facilities, some military installations also began to be secretly constructed. However, they were all deliberately built underground, making them invisible from the outside. Shortly after the Southern Star Civilization's advanced fleet began to get busy, the Blue Moon Civilization's advanced fleet also arrived from another direction of the Red Dwarf Star. They seamlessly occupied another planet and began relevant construction. The heads of the advanced fleets held several initial meetings to discuss some follow-up details, and thus, the space bases designated for this negotiation began to be constructed. The two major civilizations agreed that the final negotiations would take place within these space bases. This significant space base would be shared equally by both civilizations and would eventually connect in space. At that time, the military leaders of both civilizations would conduct negotiations here that would concern the future fate of both civilizations. Time passed swiftly. The space bases for each side were quickly completed and connected in space. At this moment, 2 massive space carriers finally entered this star system from 2 different directions. In the control room of the Fire Sea space carrier, Heijun looked at the bright, deep red star with a sense of emotion. It was an honor to witness the change in the fate of 2 major civilizations. The Gliese 393 star continued to quietly emit light and heat, showing no reaction to the events occurring in its domain. Let us go. It's time to fight for the future of our Southern Star civilization, Heijun said solemnly as he slowly stood up. According to previous agreements, both space carriers remained in the orbit of their respective temporarily occupied planets. Subsequently, 5 Nebula-class warships escorted a Comet-class warship as both sides flew towards the space base, named the Hall of Peace by their leaders. Following the previously agreed process, members of both negotiation teams met through a glass barrier in an environment suitable for their respective intelligent life forms, exchanged greetings, conveyed their leaders' regards and blessings, and took photos in their spacesuits. Inside the Hall of Peace, members of both civilizations' negotiation teams smiled, creating a very harmonious atmosphere. After going through a series of procedures, the negotiations officially began, and the previously cultivated harmonious atmosphere immediately vanished. Both sides were on high alert, arguing their positions fiercely without yielding. Countless pieces of information intertwined, with various strategies and tactics being deployed in succession. Communication relay stations spread across the vast starry sky were constantly operating, relaying the latest news back to the home star systems while sending external information back to the negotiation teams. The negotiations lasted a full 3 months, but there was no progress at all. The differences in demands were too great to reach any consensus. However, Heijun was not anxious at all. He understood that for such significant negotiations, achieving a result within a year would be considered efficient. It was not unusual for discussions to take 2 to 3 years. With only 3 months having passed, there was no need to rush. Moreover, he keenly sensed that the Blue Moon civilization, like his own, was approaching this negotiation with great sincerity. The more serious the other party was, the more they argued their points without yielding, which only proved their sincerity in the negotiations. Since both parties are sincere, there is no need to rush. We can take our time. Such negotiations typically occur every 4 days. During the discussions, both sides are on edge, seemingly ready to clash at any moment. However, after the negotiations conclude, there is an unspoken understanding between the two civilizations during the intervals. Today, one side invites the other to attend a concert to appreciate their musical achievements, and tomorrow, the other side reciprocates with an invitation to a calligraphy and painting appreciation event. The day after, one side hosts a wine gathering, and the following day, the other side invites them for a stargazing walk. At the negotiation table, the two factions are bitter enemies. Yet, beneath the table, they act like long-lost friends, exchanging gifts that could nearly fill a spaceship. The situation in the Gliese 393 system fluctuates between tension and relaxation. In the Wangliang 3-star system, both fleets remain in a silent standoff. At the edge of the Wangliang 3-star system, the human fleet is still lying in wait. At this moment, the two fleets dispatched by Chunyu are almost in position. Presumably, the commanders of these fleets are anxiously awaiting news from the negotiation table. Chunyu speculates quietly. At this stage, both sides should refrain from rash actions. However, what if the defense fleet of the Southern Star Civilization suddenly comes under attack? What changes might occur? This is truly exciting. The Southern Star Civilization and the Blue Moon Civilization are still unaware of each other's existence. Once one side is attacked, they will undoubtedly suspect the other. This could trigger changes that Chunyu would be pleased to see. However, a piece of information relayed by the spy satellite network caused Chunyu, who had already decided to launch a surprise attack, to change his mind instantly. At this moment, the vast network of spy satellites has been successfully established, filtering through hidden communication relay points, and some findings have already emerged. However, Chunyu did not destroy them directly. Instead, he quietly noted their locations for future action. Now, the spy satellite network has made some unexpected discoveries. Is that the Yunguang space carrier? Upon seeing the massive ship, Chunyu immediately recognized it. The Yunguang space carrier has finally arrived? In that case, a surprise attack is in order. Chunyu made up his mind instantly. Chapter 154, Red Mist in the Vastness of Space. A colossal space carrier floats silently. Above it, thousands of large and heavy warehouses are suspended and fixed on supports, giving it an unusually bulky appearance. It currently faces away from the 2 stars in the Wangliang 3-star system, with tens of thousands of thrusters simultaneously emitting bright light. A layer of luminous shield completely envelopes its outer layer, filtering out interstellar dust and high-energy particles while being ready to react to any potential attacks. This is a necessary precaution when approaching a battlefield. The captain of the Yunguang knows well that they are floating in the vast expanse of space. In the void, this space carrier is like a speck of dust drifting on an ocean, making it nearly impossible for hostile forces to detect. Not to mention that measures have been taken to conceal our actions. For instance, the exhaust direction of the spacecraft carrier is intentionally misaligned from the core of the galaxy, pointing towards an open area at the galaxy's edge. This greatly reduces the likelihood of inadvertently targeting enemy detection equipment with the exhaust and being discovered. Moreover, the exhaust of our spacecraft carrier has undergone high directional adjustments. The exhaust plume resembles a laser beam, with minimal dispersion. Unlike typical light sources that expand into a large spot as distance increases, unnecessarily increasing the visible area. However, even so, Yunguang still cautiously adhered to battlefield protocols, setting the energy shield power to the maximum and adjusting the detector to the highest sensitivity. Additionally, the 86 escort warships have departed from the temporary dock and entered a state of readiness. He himself had long awakened from hibernation, ready to respond to any unforeseen incidents. Better safe than sorry. What if luck truly turns against him and he encounters the enemy by chance? At that moment, all his preparations would come into play. Such situations can be dodged 1,000 times, but one stroke of bad luck can ruin everything. Yunguang has always been very cautious about this. Becoming the captain of a spacecraft carrier at a young age was not merely by chance. At this moment, the distance to the core of the galaxy is still approximately 0.36 light-years. Considering the deceleration process, it will take several more years to truly reach the destination. Time quietly slips away under such circumstances. Around the Wangliang 3-star system, after discussions with Otto, Emo Zhua, and others, Qinyu roughly determined the subsequent ambush plan. There is no doubt that the technology of the Southern Star Civilization surpasses ours. Their warships are also stronger than ours. Well, on the Yunguang spacecraft carrier. There are 84 warships similar to our Nebula class and 2 warships similar to our Comet class. According to a 1 to 5 power comparison, we need to deploy at least 420 Nebula class warships and 10 Comet class warships to ensure victory. The Yunguang spacecraft carrier itself also possesses strong defensive capabilities. With an energy shield protection level reaching P3, the carrier is equipped with numerous defensive weapons, including interstellar missiles, electromagnetic energy cannons, and laser cannons, among others. Although it cannot compare to warships specifically designed for combat, it should not be underestimated. We also need to allocate 100 warships specifically to deal with it. That totals to 530 warships. Xunyu has a specialized rating system for the protective capabilities of energy shields, comprehensively assessing factors such as energy consumption, range, strength, deflection ability, and piercing resistance. The levels are divided into first, second, and third tiers, referred to as P1, P2, and P3, with higher numbers indicating stronger overall performance. The energy shield protection level of his most valued warship, the human-class dwarf planet warship, which is also his residence, barely reaches P2. This is due to technological disparities that cannot simply be resolved by accumulation of resources. It requires gradual research and development to catch up. Overall, to deal with this aerospace carrier and 85 warships, our side would need to deploy 530 warships to ensure success. Otto suggested, "Leader, I think we should double that number." Let's deploy 1,000 warships to be safer. The bionic robot representing Chunyu smiled and shook its head. Otto, don't be so petty. It's just warships. Our human civilization lacks many things, but not warships. I've decided to deploy 3,000 warships, with a certain type of battleship as the flagship. 3,000 warships. And a flagship ship. Otto and Mo Zhu were both shocked at the same time. Deploying so many warships to deal with a single aerospace carrier truly felt like using a cannon to shoot a mosquito. However, even with our warship numbers being several times greater than the target, Xunyu did not let his guard down. He still assigned Otto and Mo Zhu to carefully draft the strategic tactics, while he himself conducted extensive simulations and calculations. Finally, he set up a series of communication relay stations, controlling the massive fleet of 3,000 warships in real time as they journeyed into the vastness of space. After reaching the designated location, the fleet halted and began to accelerate in reverse because the aerospace carrier was heading towards a certain star system. To create a combat space, we had to maintain the same direction by accelerating first and then decelerating. Fortunately, warships are different from aerospace carriers. Large ships like aerospace carriers emphasize long endurance, requiring low acceleration but able to sustain it for extended periods, ultimately achieving high speeds. In contrast, warships focus on strong maneuverability, needing acceleration rates of hundreds or even thousands of meters per square second. This allows warships to reach high speeds quickly, making it easier for military commanders to deploy forces and strategize. Even so, it took Xunyu over 2 months to complete the trap setup. Next, they just had to wait for the aerospace carrier to walk into the trap. After waiting for a while, the opportunity for combat finally arrived. At that moment, 3,000 warships hidden in the vastness of space simultaneously targeted the aerospace carrier, which was over 100 million kilometers away. Then, all the electromagnetic energy cannons equipped on the warships, regardless of size, began firing at full power and speed. With 3,000 warships, the total number of electromagnetic cannons amounted to a staggering 460,000. On average, these cannons could fire 3 projectiles per second. This time, the full force firing lasted for a total of 24 hours. As a result, approximately 120 billion projectiles flew towards the aerospace carrier at high speed. On the display screen, the aerospace carrier was represented by a green dot, while the projectiles appeared as a large cloud of red mist. There were simply too many projectiles to count, converging together to form a fog. Chapter 155, No Escape Zone. Otto, Mo Zhu, and others watched nervously in front of the screen. In the minds of many, the ideal outcome of this battle would be a swift and decisive victory, our side launching an overwhelming assault to crush the enemy's defenses in one fell swoop, thereby securing the win and withdrawing immediately without hesitation. If it devolves into a stalemate or a war of attrition, it would stray from our original intent. After all, this is a battlefield between 2 great civilizations, each deploying heavy forces, watching each other closely. If time drags on, it could easily lead to unforeseen complications. Any exposure on our part would be disastrous. With so many warships deployed, the goal of our commander is not merely to capture this air and space carrier. Rather, it is to achieve this without revealing our presence. This requires a level of technical expertise. Therefore, it is imperative to resolve this quickly. The sooner, the better. At this moment, The effectiveness of this round of barrage is crucial to the successful execution of our strategy. In space warfare, due to the considerable distance between both sides, even the high-speed projectiles from electromagnetic cannons require a significant amount of time to travel from launch to impact. During this interval, the enemy's movement can change. If the enemy alters its speed or course even slightly, projectiles aimed at its original trajectory may miss their target. For instance, if the air and space carrier accelerates downward and changes its current course, it stands a good chance of evading this round of strikes. In these preemptive surprise attacks, there is a military term known as the no-escape zone. Before entering this zone, the enemy can still maneuver, change speed, or alter course to avoid being hit. However, once inside the no-escape zone, no matter what actions the adversary takes, it cannot escape its fate of being struck. Our munitions are plentiful and cover a wide area. Given the enemy's maneuverability, even at full acceleration, it cannot escape this coverage. This is the origin of the term no-escape. At this moment, the air and space carrier is about an hour away from entering the no-escape zone. Once it enters this area, everything will almost be settled. Watching the green dot representing the air and space carrier steadily approach the red line indicating the no-escape zone, a sense of anticipation rises in the heart of the observer. Meanwhile, a banquet is being held aboard the air and space carrier. In the banquet hall, the mid-level officers, dressed in splendid attire, are elegantly enjoying performances by the military's cultural troupe in the dance floor. Relishing the compliments from their subordinates, the commander feels quite pleased. The war is nearing its end, and our air and space carrier has certainly made some contributions. When it comes time for post-war accolades, you, Captain, will undoubtedly be promoted further. Allow me to congratulate you in advance. Indeed, the contributions of our air and space carrier are evident, and the captain has played a significant role in this war. Regardless of the rewards, it would be hard to overlook this. Amidst the flattery, the captain strives to maintain a humble demeanor. The war is not over yet. Everything is still uncertain. In the midst of a peaceful atmosphere, a voice suddenly shattered the joyful ambience. An officer hurriedly approached Yun Guang. What is the matter? The music came to a halt. The officer leaned in close to Yun Guang and whispered something, causing Yun Guang's expression to darken instantly. He set down his glass and turned to leave. His subordinates exchanged puzzled glances, unsure of what had happened. The banquet came to an abrupt end. Lu went. That old fool, doesn't he know when to quit? Yun Guang gritted his teeth. Lu Went was the frontline commander of the Wang Liang 3 battlefield, holding a crucial position. Yet at that moment, the officer had informed him that Lu Went planned to give him an incompetent rating. Was it really a big deal that he arrived 20 years later than scheduled? The fleet of the Mozodi civilization had been destroyed in the solar system, and he had suffered an undeserved disaster. Arriving 20 years late was beyond his control. How could he be considered incompetent? With the war nearing its end, once the rating was issued, it would be too late to change anything. He had to come up with a plan during this window of time. Yun Guang made up his mind. He summoned a few trusted officers and began to conspire in a room, while leaving others outside to guard against any unrelated personnel approaching. Another officer, not particularly close to him, hesitantly walked over, but was quickly blocked. Is there something? Nothing major, the officer stammered. I just received a report from an observer at the 6th communication station, stating that some faint lights were detected in the Wang Liang 3 system. It's uncertain whether it indicates military activity or if it's just interstellar dust. I thought I should inform the captain. The captain is busy and can't be disturbed. The guard impatiently dismissed him. The officer pondered for a moment before turning to leave. Such incidents had occurred before, each time due to observational errors. This time would surely be the same. Yes, it had to be. The war was over. How could the Blue Moon civilization possibly launch a surprise attack on them? Moreover, the routes and schedules of the aerospace mothership were classified, so how could the Blue Moon civilization know? 10 minutes after this officer consoled himself and departed. In another location within the Wang Liang 3 system, aboard the human-class dwarf planet battleship, Odo and Mo Zhu both exhaled in relief. The screen clearly displayed that the Yun Guang aerospace mothership had crossed the red line, truly entering the no-escape zone. Odo, fully aware of the Yun Guang's capabilities, knew that from this moment on, regardless of how it maneuvered, it could not escape the impending strike of electromagnetic projectiles like a raging storm. Time slowly passed. The cluster of electromagnetic projectiles drew closer to the Yun Guang aerospace mothership, when the distance between them shrank to about 15 million kilometers. The advanced radar early warning system finally responded. Even the radar warning system of a seasoned third-level civilization would not normally be able to provide warnings from such a distance. However, in the current environment of empty space, where it was eerily quiet and free of any interference, the warning range could extend this far. At that moment, a piercing alarm sounded, echoing throughout the entire aerospace mothership and every warship on standby. Alarm! Alarm! The radar warning system detected a large number of electromagnetic energy projectiles approximately 15 million kilometers ahead of the flight path. Alarm! Alarm! Yun Guang, who was initially lost in thought while scheming in the room, suddenly looked up in shock. A cluster of electromagnetic projectiles. An ambush? Quick! Maneuver! Immediately maneuver! A staff officer stumbled into the room, his face filled with despair. Captain, we can't escape. We've entered the no-escape zone. Chapter 156. Interception Rate. No escape zone. How is that possible? Yun Guang was furious. The radar detection distance showed that the cluster of electromagnetic projectiles was still as far as 15 million kilometers away from their position. At such a distance, even the high-speed electromagnetic projectiles would take at least 10 to 20 minutes to reach them, right? With such a long time, given their maneuverability, how could they possibly have entered a no-escape zone? Captain, preliminary observations indicate that the number of electromagnetic projectiles is as high as 100 to 200 billion, covering a vast area. With our mothership's maneuverability, even at full speed, we cannot escape the strike range. What? Yun Guang suddenly fell silent, his face filled with shock. 100 to 200 billion electromagnetic projectiles? This. Quickly calculating in his mind, Yun Guang came to a conclusion. This meant that the enemy had at least 1,000 ships participating in the ambush against their lone spacecraft. But why would over 1,000 ships target just one aerospace mothership? When did he become so important? To mobilize so many ships for an ambush against him was too much of an overestimation, wasn't he? In that moment, Yun Guang even suspected that there was something crucial aboard the mothership that he was unaware of. With only a few minutes left before the strike, Yun Guang had no time for further contemplation and decisively issued orders. Sound the alarm. All personnel prepare for battle. Set the energy shield to maximum power. Activate the interception devices immediately. Observation team, report to me. Look for weak spots in the projectiles. Minimize damage as much as possible. Under a series of commands and the blaring alarm, all personnel aboard the massive Yun Guang aerospace mothership hurriedly sprang into action. Countless soldiers raced to their posts. Yun Guang and several senior officials of the mothership also rushed to the main control room to take command. Report. Radar detection and mapping is complete. On the screen, a vast net composed of over 100 billion electromagnetic energy projectiles appeared before everyone. Within this net, some areas were lighter in color, indicating lower projectile density. Other areas were darker, indicating higher density. After comprehensively assessing the distances, speeds, and their own maneuverability, Yun Guang decisively ordered, maneuver towards here. He had roughly identified an area with the lowest projectile density. Understood. As the aerospace mothership moved at full speed, Yun Guang's body swayed. But his eyes remained glued to the screen. The first wave of strikes was about to arrive. Countdown, 3029 intercept. In the vastness of space, countless projectiles from electromagnetic cannons, each weighing only a few grams and not exceeding 20 grams, were in an excited state, emitting bright light like a swarm of bees, heading towards the massive cloud ship. At this moment, the commander glanced at the battlefield's live feed. Without the aid of instruments, he could already see the silhouettes of those projectiles with the naked eye. They gathered together, forming a luminous curtain that completely obscured the vastness of space ahead. On board the cloud ship, hundreds of high-power deep space radar systems operated at full capacity, using electromagnetic wave echoes to accurately measure the trajectory and speed of each incoming projectile, generating real-time data to be transmitted back to the central computer. The central computer processed the data at full speed, creating interception plans and sending specific parameters to the interception electromagnetic cannons. The fusion reactor also operated at full capacity, continuously extracting massive energy from atomic nuclei and channeling it into the intercepting projectiles through the electromagnetic cannons. Over 10,000 small electromagnetic cannons, specialized for launching intercepting projectiles, adjusted their targeting directions precisely under the control of the central computer and quickly launched projectile after projectile. Within just a few seconds, as many as hundreds of thousands of interceptors were fired. They smoothly penetrated the energy shield and flew into the vastness of space. Both the interceptors and the incoming projectiles were extremely small, the largest no bigger than a peanut and the smallest comparable to a sesame seed. Moreover, both sides operated at incredibly high speeds, reaching tens of thousands of kilometers per second. Under such circumstances, the interceptors were still able to collide accurately with the incoming projectiles and, using their kinetic energy, triggered the massive energy contained within the excited state, causing the projectiles to deviate from their original paths. Even the slightest deviation, after expanding through space, was enough to prevent them from striking the mothership. In just a few seconds, as many as 100,000 projectiles were intercepted, with more interceptors continuously being launched. The Cloud ship had the capability to launch approximately 40,000 interceptors every second. At this moment, the escort ships also retreated within the energy shield of the Cloud ship. After a brief preparation, they began to activate their own electromagnetic cannons to launch interceptors simultaneously with the mothership. Each warship and cannon was under the unified control of the central computer of the mothership regarding which direction to fire and how many interceptors to launch. The tens of thousands of electromagnetic cannons worked in perfect harmony, avoiding any interference or simultaneous targeting of the same objective. 85 warships could launch approximately 30,000 interceptors per second on average. Combined with the mothership's 40,000, the total reached 70,000. At this moment, far away, billions of kilometers away, Chen Yu, who was observing the situation through super-distance communication, immediately received a piece of data after the interception began. An interception success rate of 526? That's remarkably high. This Southern Star civilization is indeed impressive. According to this ratio, on average, about 2 interceptors can intercept 1 projectile from the electromagnetic cannon of our side. This efficiency is quite terrifying. To be aware, when facing our own level of electromagnetic cannon projectiles, the intercept success rate that Chunyu can achieve is at most 226. Moreover, the attacking electromagnetic cannons of the opposing civilization are more advanced than ours. Overall, achieving a 10 intercept success rate against their electromagnetic cannon projectiles would be quite impressive. The intercept success rate for our side's electromagnetic cannon projectiles is 526, while the success rate for intercepting their projectiles is only 10, leading to a staggering difference of 5 times. This disparity on the battlefield would probably result in a one-sided crushing defeat. Lacking quality, we must rely on quantity. How does it matter if their technology is more advanced and their combat power stronger? They can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Chen Yu thought to himself, let them take a wave of my attacks first. We'll see if they can withstand it. Chapter 157. The last-ditch effort in the vastness of space. Fierce collisions are happening at all times. The electromagnetic cannon projectiles, small as dust, unleash enormous energy upon impact due to their extremely high speed. Each explosion creates a fireball the size of a room, which vanishes in an instant. The Yunguang-class aerospace carrier and escort ships fire approximately 70,000 interceptors per second. With a 52 intercept success rate, this results in an average of 360,000 electromagnetic energy projectiles being intercepted every second, creating 360,000 fireballs in the vast, deep space. In an instant, the originally dark space is filled with enormous fireballs, resembling fireworks in a stunning display, completely overshadowing even the light of countless stars in the universe. This is merely a small-scale battle. Shinyu understands that if a large-scale battle occurs, like the last battle between the opposing civilization and another in the Wangliang system, the scene would be even more grand, potentially impacting the entire star system. Even the stars would be affected and start to behave violently. This is the power of technology. Since the Yunguang-class aerospace carrier began intercepting, only a little over 10 minutes have passed, and approximately 35 million electromagnetic energy projectiles launched by our side have already been intercepted. This number is undoubtedly enormous. However, it's not a problem, as we have launched even more projectiles. Even though the Yunguang-class aerospace carrier deliberately chose a low-density area to avoid more projectiles, the number they face in this low-density area still amounts to billions. A mere 35 million intercepted projectiles is insufficient to influence the overall situation. After desperately intercepting, the cluster of electromagnetic cannon projectiles finally made contact with the target. At that moment, the highly energetic electromagnetic projectiles struck violently against the energy shield, creating ripples on the bright surface of the shield. Initially, the ripples were few and distinguishable individually. However, soon, these countless ripples merged together, making the surface of the energy shield undulate like the surface of a pond in a downpour. Hold on. In 8 hours, we will have weathered this wave of attacks. In the control room, Yun Guang was hoarse from shouting, constantly reallocating interception forces and distributing energy shares, fully committed to resisting the storm-like onslaught. At this moment, the 3,000 warships dispatched by Chun Yu were also maneuvering at full speed, rushing here as quickly as possible. Chun Yu's strategy was to take advantage of the enemy's weakness. After a wave of intense attacks, they would immediately engage in close combat to annihilate all resistance, leaving no opportunity for the enemy to breathe. Time passed rapidly amidst the fierce battle. All personnel involved, including Yun Guang, were on high alert. It felt like an eternity, and Yun Guang even doubted it could have been 100 years, but finally, he received a new report. Our side is expected to pass through the electromagnetic projectile cluster in 5 minutes. 5 minutes? At that moment, Yun Guang felt his body go limp. An almost irresistible wave of fatigue spreading from his heart throughout his body. Passing through the electromagnetic projectile cluster meant that this round of attacks would finally come to an end, although there might still be subsequent strikes. Yun Guang believed that under full alert, they would definitely be able to maneuver and escape before entering the no-escape zone. What is the current situation? Energy supply rate? Projectile reserves? Electromagnetic cannon failure rate? Energy shield efficiency? Struggling against his fatigue, Yun Guang forced himself to ask a series of questions. Report to the captain. Due to prolonged high-load energy supply, 30 out of the 36 fusion reactors on the mothership have overheated and must temporarily operate at low power for repairs. The projectile reserves have decreased to 16. Laser cannons, interstellar missiles, and mines are sufficiently stocked. The failure rate of the electromagnetic cannon is at 22. And the energy shield has lost about 80 of its functionality due to overload, now relying on emergency repairs to hold on. At the end of its tether. Truly at the end of its tether. Yun Guang understood that if they survived this wave of attacks, their state would be at its limit. If there were another similar strike, even at just 1/10 of the intensity, the mothership would definitely not hold up. But the enemy had not yet truly revealed themselves. The real battle might still be ahead. Have you contacted Commander Lu Went? How long until rescue arrives? Contact made. Commander Lu Went is dispatching rescue forces nearby, but it is expected to take about 2 months to arrive. 2 months. Are they coming to collect our corpses? No, they won't even be able to collect the bodies. Yun Guang roared in anger a few times, but ultimately could only sit down in despair. He knew that this was not Lu Went's fault. The vastness of interstellar space made distances too great. 2 months for support was already considered fast. At this moment, the crisis could only be faced with their own strength. They could not rely on anyone else. Logistics personnel, make emergency repairs immediately. Combat personnel, take a quick rest and prepare for battle. He gasped as he issued the orders. Secretly relieved. Thankfully, they had made it through, and the energy shield had not been breached. If the energy shield is breached, then there truly is no way out. Even if only 20 of its functionality remains, as long as it hasn't been completely destroyed, there is still a chance for repair. It seems that the enemy has underestimated our defensive capabilities. Yun Guang thought to himself. If only the previous force had been increased by another 10, no, 5. We would have had no chance at all. Now, by a stroke of luck, we still have a slight possibility of turning the tide. After leaving the cluster of projectiles, Silence finally returned to space. However, Chinyu had no intention of giving them any opportunity. After carefully observing the battlefield situation, Chinyu finally breathed a sigh of relief. Good. This wave of attack did not breach the energy shield of the Yun Guang space carrier. Ajuo chuckled. Now, Yun Guang is probably still relieved that the energy shield wasn't broken, perhaps even mocking us for missing such a great opportunity. Mo Zhu disdainfully replied. If the energy shield had been breached and the space carrier damaged, how could we seize anything or capture anyone? Given the current situation, it's just right. Pausing for a moment, Mo Zhu then respectfully addressed the bionic robot representing Chinyu. The leader's calculations are truly impressive. The leader was able to consciously allocate the density of the electromagnetic projectiles and control the intensity of the attack, managing the extent of their damage. Without the leader, we could never have created the current situation. Chapter 158. Rather die than surrender in interstellar warfare at the level of a third-tier civilization. Breaching the energy shield essentially means the annihilation of the spaceship. The reason is simple. Against energy-formed electromagnetic projectiles, no type of protective armor is nearly effective. Moreover, to adapt to the lightweight requirements following the advent of energy shield technology, third-tier civilizations have long ceased to pursue thick armor for their warships or carriers. Their armor is generally very thin, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that they are thin-skinned but large in content. In this context, without an energy shield, even stray shots can destroy a warship. Thus, the breach of the energy shield equates to the annihilation of the warship, a principle universally upheld by all third-tier civilizations. At this moment, the situation of the Yun Guang space carrier teetering on the brink of destruction was intentionally orchestrated by Chinyu. With astonishing computational power and control capabilities, he manipulated thousands of warships and hundreds of thousands of electromagnetic cannons to meticulously create a low-density zone within the cluster of projectiles. To minimize the losses of the space carrier, Chinyu calculated that Yun Guang would inevitably maneuver the carrier along this low-density path. Simultaneously, he deliberately adjusted the projectile density in this low-density zone through extremely precise calculations to ensure that the space carrier would be in this state after passing through the projectile cluster. All of this was calculated by Chinyu from the very beginning. This series of calculations may sound simple, but executing them is incredibly difficult. Even with 100,000 capable staff and 100 supercomputers, it would be impossible to implement such a tactic. The requirements for precise operation and coordination among them are far too high. Ordinary intelligent life forms simply cannot achieve it. This tactic is something even the beings from a level 3 civilization have never heard of. It is simply unfathomable. At this moment, on the Cloudlight aerospace carrier, all logistical personnel and soldiers are busy. Each person moves with the urgency of a wound-up toy, hurrying along. There is so much to be done. The damaged areas of the ship need repairs, malfunctions need fixing, key components of the fusion reactor need replacement, and the energy shield generator requires urgent overhauling. The most critical concern is the uncertainty of when the enemy might arrive and how much time they have left. At this moment, Yun Guang involuntarily begins to pray to the deities of his civilization, despite not being a believer in such matters. Clearly, the deities of the Southern Star civilization have not offered him any protection. Just a few hours into the repairs, an observer rushed into the control room in a state of panic. Report. The Deep Space Detection Radar has identified a large number of enemy ships moving toward us at full speed, estimated to be around 3,000 vessels. Yun Guang felt his vision darken. 3,000 ships. What is there to fight for? Everyone might as well just give up. The insufferable Blue Moon civilization. Who knows what madness they are experiencing? I'm just one aerospace carrier. Do they really need to mobilize so many ships against it? Initially, facing an estimated 1,000 enemy ships, Yun Guang had held on to a glimmer of hope, thinking that perhaps they could rely on the aerospace carrier and fight back. Maybe even turn the tide. But now, the number 3,000 shattered his last shred of hope. Yun Guang weakly waved his hand, saying nothing. Captain, what should we do? A deputy captain asked anxiously. Yun Guang replied feebly, what can we do? Just let it be. Everyone can decide how they want to handle it. The news felt like it drained all his spirit, leaving him slumped in his chair, silent, as if he had already accepted his fate. All personnel aboard the Cloudlight aerospace carrier, you are surrounded. Surrender immediately. We will ensure your safety. Anyone who dares to resist will be dealt with decisively. A full 3,000 enemy ships surrounded the aerospace carrier, with hundreds of thousands of electromagnetic energy cannons aimed at it, ready to strike. Although Chun Yu's intention was to eliminate the enemy's fighting force immediately and not give them any chance to breathe, it would be ideal if Yun Guang and his crew surrendered. That would make things simpler. Keeping the aerospace carrier intact and not breaking its energy shield was meant to demoralize them and crush their will to resist. However, if they did not surrender, Chun Yu was indifferent. The energy shield would soon be breached, and they could just break through it. At this point, after the previous round of bombardment from electromagnetic projectiles, they would quickly gain control of the situation without worrying about collateral damage to the aerospace carrier amidst the chaos. The most important thing was still the aircraft carrier itself. If it weren't for the fear of damage during the chaos, Chun Yu wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. With 3,000 warships charging in, they could easily overwhelm them. The surrender orders from the human fleet echoed continuously in the control room. The faces of the high-ranking officers aboard the mothership turned ashen. Yun Guang was silent for a moment, then suddenly gritted his teeth. I understand. The war is about to end, and our civilization is negotiating with the Blue Moon civilization. Their intention is to capture us and use us as leverage to demand concessions at the negotiation table. Once this clicked in his mind, Yun Guang instantly understood everything. Only this reason could explain the current situation. Otherwise, why would the Blue Moon civilization deploy so many warships without directly annihilating us, but instead demand our surrender? This made sense. Foolish Lu went. He didn't foresee this in advance and failed to warn us. Damn it. Yun Guang cursed through clenched teeth, but gradually became despondent. At this point, understanding the truth was of no use. Should we surrender? Since the Blue Moon civilization aims to use us as bargaining chips, there is a high probability that we could survive and eventually return to our civilization. Yun Guang believed that his family would strongly advocate for this. However, having experienced active surrender would likely dim his future prospects. Yun Guang looked at his several deputies. Some decisions are not ones that can be easily made from my position. Yet this decision must be made. In this situation, if someone were willing to decide for me, I would be grateful to them. In the future, I would ensure they receive adequate rewards. The words cannot be too explicit. At this moment, Yun Guang could only hope that his deputies were smart enough to understand what he meant. The deputies exchanged glances, some not quite grasping Yun Guang's meaning. Suddenly, one deputy had a flash of insight and instantly understood. He stood up and eagerly said to Yun Guang, Captain, let us surrender. For the lives of the 9,000 warriors, please surrender. A flicker of relief passed through Yun Guang's eyes as he quietly sighed, yet his tone was extremely stern and resolute. What are you saying? I am Yun Guang, captain of the South Star Civilization's aerospace mothership. I can lose my life, but a soldier's honor cannot be lost. I would rather die than surrender. Chapter 159. Tear it down, move it away. With the first deputy's request, the other deputies, who were a bit slower to catch on, gradually began to understand. They too took action. Captain, surrender. We all know your loyalty and willingness to sacrifice, but we don't want to die. If we don't surrender, the Blue Moon civilization will kill us all. Shut up. Yun Guang shouted fiercely. The civilization raised us, and now is the time to sacrifice our lives for it. How can we be afraid of death? Have you all forgotten the speaker's teachings? In that case, I'm sorry. Brothers, tie up the captain. Several deputies rushed forward and quickly bound Yun Guang tightly with ropes. The nearby advisors and observers were stunned and did not dare to intervene. Yun Guang struggled desperately, shouting and cursing, showcasing his integrity and loyalty to civilization, as well as his emphasis on military honor and disregard for life and death. However, he was outnumbered. In the end, Yun Guang was forced to surrender by his subordinates. This should offset the negative effects of my capture, he thought to himself, still struggling and cursing, but his gaze towards the subordinates was filled with admiration. He had already planned how to repay these subordinates once the situation was resolved. After Yun Guang was subdued, one of the subordinates took charge and issued the surrender order. All members of the Yun Guang space carrier fleet, I command you to surrender immediately. After sending the surrender order internally, he quickly communicated with the fleet of another civilization. We surrender. Surrender. Under the watchful eyes of 3000 warships. A response came immediately. Shut down all ship energy shields and wait for our takeover. All personnel on your side, gather immediately and enter our life support ships. Once they left their own warships, their fate would be truly out of their hands. However, given the current situation, there was no other option. On board the space carrier, the warriors of the other civilization looked sorrowful as they gathered in the hall, waiting for further arrangements. Yun Guang was escorted into the hall by several subordinates. Once again, the warriors witnessed Captain Yun Guang's loyalty and fearlessness. Let me go? I will not surrender. If you have the ability, just kill me. The speaker has taught us that as soldiers, we must be ready to sacrifice our lives for civilization at any time. Let me die? I will not surrender. Seeing the loyal and fearless Captain Yun Guang, many warriors hung their heads in shame, feeling utterly embarrassed. At this moment, the energy shields of the space carrier and various warships had been shut down. They were like crabs shedding their shells, exposing their soft interiors, ready for disposal. Shinyu was not polite at all. Under his command, hundreds of warships approached, directly docking with the Yun Guang space carrier and the remaining warships, releasing a large number of robots inside, while the warriors were driven into their own ships. Nearly 10,000 warriors lowered their heads, raised their hands, and accepted their fate of becoming captives with downcast faces. Yun Guang and some high-ranking officers from the carrier received relatively special treatment. They were not mixed with the others, but were separately detained in one ship. Upon entering the ship and seeing the hatch close, relieved that the others could not see them, Yun Guang immediately sighed in relief. Several subordinates hurriedly untied him. Thank you. Yun Guang sincerely expressed his gratitude and solemnly promised. Once we return to civilization, I will repay you. Thank you, Captain. After that, the group fell into silence. After all, becoming a captive was not a pleasant experience. Now, they awaited further arrangements from the other civilization. While receiving and detaining the captives, Chinyu had already begun the second task. The advanced state of the other civilization and their own backwardness were starkly evident. Chinyu had to acknowledge this gap. So, with a starship from the Southern Star civilization at this moment, what should he do? Of course, he had to move everything he could, emptying out the enormous starship that was thousands of meters long. For things that couldn't be moved, he needed to quickly measure and understand the structure, collect samples for material analysis, and record everything possible for future study. It would be even better if he could take the starship directly. However, Chen Yu was painfully aware that he couldn't take the starship with him. The reason was simple. It was too large, too heavy, had very low mobility, and was a massive target. If he forced its removal, the Southern Star civilization would likely discover his presence and track him down, ruining all subsequent plans. With no other choice, Chen Yu had to adopt this method. Under his control, hundreds of thousands of robots arrived inside and outside the now empty starship, bringing with them a large amount of machinery that could operate directly in space. Deep space find detection radar? Dismantle it and take it away. Long-range macro scanning radar? Dismantle it and take it away. Long-distance communication device? Pack it up and take it away. 3D battlefield scenario scanning device? Dismantle it and take it away. Energy shield generator module? Dismantle it and take it away. This armor material seems interesting, with a high reflectivity that can effectively defend against laser exposure. It appears to be from a different technological line. Take it. Shin Yu tore down everything he could see, like a starving beggar in front of a lavish banquet, packing it into his own spacecraft. Hundreds of thousands of robots and various space machines swarmed the massive starship like ants, creating a bustling scene in the vastness of space. However, Shin Yu quickly realized he had to make choices. He couldn't take everything he saw. The reason was simple. His spacecraft was running out of space. The equipment, components, instruments, and structures on a starship were far too numerous. Even heavy transport ships would require many. At this moment, he had only dispatched a few warships, which made it impossible to take everything. To ensure the efficiency and speed of the operation, the low-mobility transport ships couldn't be dispatched, leaving only warships available. Moreover, to avoid detection by the two major civilizations, even the warships had to be limited in number. This was one of the reasons Chunyu deployed as many as 3,000 warships to carry more items. With no other options, Chunyu had to make decisions, dismantling and taking away the high-value, smaller items, while leaving the rest on the starship. Chapter 160. Infiltration. Chunyu's remarkable efficiency was once again clearly demonstrated during this dismantling operation. Under the support of long-distance communication technology, Chunyu operated hundreds of thousands of robots and machines located here in real time. In less than a day, he completely dismantled the Cloud Light Space mothership. A total of 3,000 warships of varying sizes were filled to the brim. Every warship was packed with various components, completely full. Even the 85 warships originally belonging to the Southern Star Civilization were not spared. He filled them up as well. From this moment on, these warships produced by the Southern Star Civilization had become the property of human civilization. After the dismantling activities concluded, Chunyu felt a bit reluctant to leave. At this moment, the space mothership still appeared intact from the outside, with almost no visible damage. Although the interior had been thoroughly dismantled by Chunyu, there were still many valuable pieces of equipment left. Additionally, the Cloud Light Space mothership carried a staggering 1.2 billion tons of various primary industrial goods and rare resources, similar to what the Mozodi civilization had once provided to the Southern Star Civilization. For Chunyu, this batch of supplies held immense value. Unfortunately, he realized he could not take any of it with him. If he couldn't take it, then it must be destroyed. Suppressing his greed, Chunyu rationally launched an interstellar missile loaded with a large-yield hydrogen bomb. The missile flew slowly, and just before it struck the space mothership, it received the detonation command from Chunyu. In the next moment, a light brighter than a star erupted, and a fireball appeared out of nowhere, completely enveloping the space mothership. All materials that composed the space mothership, whether ordinary metals like gold, silver, copper, and iron, or advanced materials of a third-level civilization, were indistinguishable in the explosion of the high-yield nuclear bomb, vaporized in an instant and turned into the finest interstellar dust. The Cloud Light Space mothership became history at that moment, completely dissipating into space. It was time to go. After witnessing the space mothership turn to dust from a safe distance, Chunyu did not delay, immediately commanding the 3,000 warships, loaded with prisoners and equipment, to swiftly head back to their previous hiding place. The atmosphere aboard the human-class dwarf planet-level warship was extremely lively. Otto, Majwa, Wanwan, and others were all in high spirits. Majwa, do you remember when you went to the Cloud Light Space mothership to build connections and sought gifts from people like Yingguang? Majwa's expression darkened. Of course. I remember. That was the only time he had ever humbled himself after joining human civilization. Even today, it remained fresh in his memory. Well then, this batch of prisoners will be your responsibility to train. Otto, you will be Majwa's assistant. My only requirement is to ensure these prisoners also join human civilization and contribute to our development. Intelligent life, especially that of a third-level civilization, is extremely valuable and should not be wasted easily. Majwa's expression brightened. Yes, leader, I guarantee to complete the task. Otto was equally excited. He knew that once Yun Guang and others joined human civilization, the dwarf race would finally be able to live up to its name. Otherwise, with so many members of the Three-Eyed Clan in human civilization, and only a few big and small cats among the dwarf clan, not even having a fixed base, and having to share an office with the three-eyed beings, it feels quite awkward. Moreover, the leader of the dwarf clan will surely be myself. At that time, I would hold a high position. Just imagining my former superiors showing deference to me, and my former colleagues treating me with utmost respect, feels incredibly satisfying. After casually dealing with the captured intelligent beings, Chunyu began to lurk again, secretly observing the movements of the two major civilizations and their reactions to this matter, while planning the next steps. At this moment, in the Wangliang system, at the frontline command center of the Southern Star Civilization, Marshal Lu Wen's expression was extremely grim. He had just received the latest battle report. Just a few minutes ago, the spacecraft Yun Guang, which claimed to have been ambushed, had completely lost contact with their side. Furthermore, their observers detected a violent flash from that direction. Judging from the type of explosion, that flash was undoubtedly from a high-yield hydrogen bomb. Now, that spacecraft should have been completely obliterated. However, Lu Wen did not care much about the destruction of a spacecraft. While the value of such a vessel is significant, it pales in comparison to other concerns. The pressing issue is how the Blue Moon civilization obtained the route and coordinate information of the Yunguang spacecraft. It is important to note that the route and coordinate information of the spacecraft is classified. It is crucial for the supply of our military resources. If frequently intercepted by the enemy, it could lead to a total collapse of the entire battlefield situation. Even at the frontline command center, there are no more than 100 individuals who have access to this top-secret information. Could it be that the Blue Moon civilization has infiltrated our command center and gotten close to one of those 100 individuals to steal the information about the Yunguang spacecraft? That seems to be the only possibility. Lu Wen did not consider other possibilities. The first alternative would be that the Blue Moon civilization developed some kind of super technology that allows them to actively detect the route and coordinates of the spacecraft. But that is simply impossible. A level 3 civilization cannot achieve that. If they could do that, why not destroy communication relay stations and cut off our communications? That would yield greater results and put us in a more passive position. As for the possibility of not having super technology, but instead finding the coordinates through a vast number of detectors in a net-like search, that is even more absurd. Lu wouldn't even entertain that thought. The second possibility is coincidence. Perhaps a detector from the Blue Moon civilization inadvertently captured the tail flame signal of the spacecraft, which allowed them to determine its coordinates and position. But that is also unlikely. The reason is simple. The universe is too vast. And the probability of such a coincidence is akin to someone on a planet using a mirror to reflect starlight, casually sweeping it, and accidentally directing the star's light into the eyes of someone on another planet. If these two possibilities can be ruled out, then the only remaining possibility is that there are traitors within our ranks or that we have been infiltrated. Even someone as mentally resilient as Lu Wen would feel a bone-chilling fear at the thought that even the command center has been compromised. This matter is too significant, to the extent that it must be reported to the speaker and the military commander. I order all troops to be on alert and ready for battle at any time. Secretary, inform the speaker and the marshal. I have important matters to report. Yes. Chapter 161 Cultural Exchange in the Gliese 393 star system. At the Peace Palace space base jointly constructed by the Blue Moon civilization and the South Star civilization. In a hall, a group of tall and stout Blue Moon people, dressed in elaborate clothing adorned with numerous sequins and unidentifiable bright strips, were performing with various strange instruments. The sounds reminiscent of saws cutting wood and sharp metallic noises scraping across glass echoed continuously. In the audience, members of the South Star Civilization Negotiation Team and accompanying members of the Blue Moon Civilization Negotiation Team were all nodding their heads, appearing to be entranced. The leader of the South Star Negotiation Team, He Zhan, was no exception. However, despite the outward appearance, he felt nothing but disdain inside. He was well aware that the clothes worn by those Blue Moon musicians were their traditional ceremonial attire, reserved for more significant occasions. While this indicated the Blue Moon Civilization's importance attached to the concert and respect for their counterparts, he found it hard to appreciate such styles. To him, those outfits were no different from beggar clothes. As for the music, although this orchestra was hailed as the pinnacle of art within the Blue Moon civilization, adored by countless Blue Moon people and even received by their supreme leader, to his ears, the so-called music was truly unbearable. Yet, to maintain outward etiquette, he could only pretend to be captivated. After what felt like an eternity, just when He Zhan was about to relieve himself due to the torture of the music, the performance finally concluded. The orchestra members bowed respectfully to the audience, and He Zhan, relieved from the torment, sincerely offered his applause. As the applause faded, he turned to the Blue Moon negotiation team leader, who was 2 or 3 sizes larger than him, also the military commander of the Blue Moon civilization, Lan Xiang. Your civilization's music is truly soul-stirring. I feel as if I have been cleansed inside and out. This is the charm of music, and your civilization has nearly reached the pinnacle in this field, able to stand toe-to-toe with our civilization's top orchestras. While speaking, he discreetly assessed Lan Xiang's physique, feeling a twinge of jealousy. Due to the differing environmental conditions of their home planets, Blue Moon people were generally tall and stout, with an average height of over 1.9 meters, while South Star people averaged only about 1.5 meters. Lan Xiang chuckled and said, I propose that after the negotiations conclude, our 2 civilizations can hold a cultural exchange meeting. At that time, we could have our civilization's orchestra perform on stage together with your civilization's orchestra, exchanging skills and ideas. This is a good thing, and please rest assured, I will do my best to facilitate this matter. The 2 heads of the negotiating teams agreed on subsequent arrangements in a friendly and harmonious atmosphere, ultimately parting ways amidst a sense of reluctance. Much like 2 old friends with a deep bond, completely forgetting that just hours earlier the 2 teams were at the negotiation table, nearly coming to blows. Upon returning to their own civilization's base, the smile on He Zhan's face quickly vanished, replaced by a gloomy expression. The negotiations with the Blue Moon civilization had made little progress in recent days. The other party was utterly unyielding, clearly prepared for a long-term struggle, which put immense pressure on him. It seemed that he needed to think of other strategies to break the deadlock as soon as possible. He Zhan began to ponder. However, before he could come up with any ideas, an aide rushed into his room. "Commander, we have an urgent report from the Wangliang star system." The frontline commander, Lu Went, reports that the Blue Moon civilization launched a surprise attack on our Skylight-class mothership yesterday. Observers detected a hydrogen bomb flash at the mothership's coordinates. It is likely that the mothership has been completely destroyed. What? He Zhan was taken aback and immediately flew into a rage. Despicable, shameless. As a qualified politician and military strategist, He Zhan quickly regained his composure after the initial anger. After a moment, he felt a chill deep within. The frontline command had clearly been infiltrated by the Blue Moon civilization. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known the coordinates of the mothership, let alone set up an ambush along its route. However, the surprise attack and destruction of a mothership would not significantly impact the overall situation. I understand now. This is a show of deterrence, a demonstration of force. The implication behind this action was clear. I have the capability to launch a surprise attack and destroy your mothership. And I can certainly do even more severe damage to you. But I have not done so. I have merely destroyed one mothership. In simple terms, the Blue Moon civilization was flexing its muscles through this incident. The purpose of flexing muscles is obvious: to force us to make concessions at the negotiating table. He Zhan's expression grew even darker. He recalled the words of the Blue Moon civilization's military leader, Lan Xiang, at the end of the concert today. He proposed to hold a cultural and artistic exchange between the two great civilizations, then perform together, exchanging skills and ideas. He Zhan was certain that the surprise attack on the Skylight-class mothership had been meticulously planned by the Blue Moon civilization. Lan Xiang must have known the outcome of the attack before he did. During the concert, he must have already been aware of this incident. So what was he hinting at with his words at the end of the concert? Perhaps the Wangliang star system was the stage, and our fleet and their fleet were the performers from the two great civilizations? The two fleets performing together on the stage of the Wangliang star system? Exchanging information might suggest that there has been communication between the two fleets, indicating that one side has infiltrated the other, thus gaining knowledge of the coordinates and trajectory data of the spacecraft. At this moment, every action, smile, and word from the commander seemed to carry a certain hidden meaning. He felt that the negotiations between the two civilizations were facing a new situation, requiring new judgments. Contact the speaker, reach out to the frontline commander for a tripartite meeting. A decision was made. At this moment, in the Peace Hall's Blue Moon chamber, the military leader of the Blue Moon civilization was in high spirits. Today's concert seems to have gone well, showcasing our civilization's rich culture and historical depth, surely conveying our goodwill and sincerity to the other side. With progress made, it was time to capitalize on the momentum. Contact the home planet and immediately plan for the cultural exchange meeting. Under the support of long-range communication technology, in the South Star System, Wangliang Star System, and Gliese 393 System, 3-star systems separated by tens of light years, frontline commander Lu Went, negotiation team leader, and the speaker of the South Star civilization, Bing Yuntian, began a highly confidential meeting. After Lu Went reported the details, Bing Yuntian quickly made a judgment. It was a demonstration, a show of force aimed at forcing concessions at the negotiation table. The other two agreed on this fundamental assessment. How should they respond? Lu Went said solemnly, "I believe we should carry out a proportional retaliation. During this time, we have also identified some secret bases of the Blue Moon civilization that we can target with a surprise attack. Proportional retaliation is a straightforward and justifiable response. If they can show their strength, so can we." In response to Lu Went's proposal, both Bing Yuntian and the negotiation leader remained silent. After a moment of thought, both shook their heads slowly. Do not retaliate. It would be meaningless. Moreover, it risks losing control of the situation and reigniting war. This statement seems somewhat weak. Lu Wen expressed dissatisfaction. When the Blue Moon civilization launched a surprise attack, did they not consider the risk of losing control and restarting conflict? Why must we now think about the bigger picture? Bing Yuntian replied solemnly, "Lu Went, war is merely the continuation of politics. If you cannot elevate your thinking to a political level, you will forever remain a military leader, never becoming a statesman." The negotiation leader added, "Lu Went, both the speaker and I have high expectations of you. You must learn to view problems from a higher perspective. I will ask you one question. Do you believe the Blue Moon civilization has the sincerity for peace talks?" Lu Went pondered seriously for a moment and said, "I believe they are quite sincere." In that case, fundamentally, the situation had not changed. Bing Yuntian decisively set the tone. We must consider the resolution of this incident from the broader perspective of both parties' negotiations. Since the Blue Moon civilization has shown a willingness to negotiate, but has also committed an act of aggression against us, It is almost certain that this is a military gamble on their part. What does a military gamble imply? It suggests that they are more eager than we are to achieve results from the negotiations. There must be significant pressure within their ranks, pressure that exceeds our previous expectations. Otherwise, such a military gamble would not have occurred. As Bing Yuntian peeled back the layers of analysis, Heijun gradually realized, this is where we can capitalize. First, we are the victims of an ambush, which gives us a natural moral advantage. If we retaliate equally, while it may feel satisfying, we would lose that moral high ground. This advantage, however, can help us pressure the other side at the negotiating table to secure greater benefits. Perhaps this incident could even become a breakthrough for negotiations. Bing Yuntian nodded in satisfaction. Exactly. Lu went. Moving forward, you need to take some actions, such as frequently mobilizing the fleet, to demonstrate our anger and apply pressure on the other side. But be careful. Do not let an actual conflict arise. We must avoid any unintended escalations that could lead to an uncontrollable situation. Heijun, you need to develop a plan to effectively leverage this situation and maintain our moral advantage to force the Blue Moon negotiation team to make concessions. The frontline commander of the Wangliang Samsung system, Lu Went, watched as Bing Yuntian and Heijun quickly reached a final decision, and the fire within him grew stronger. He stood up, his tone sorrowful. Chairman, Marshal, the Yunguang aerospace carrier is a vital logistical force for our military. It carries nearly 10,000 elite soldiers. And behind them are countless families. They perished in space due to the despicable ambush by the Blue Moon civilization, and we cannot avenge them. Instead, we must use their deaths to negotiate with the enemy. I cannot accept this. Bing Yuntian frowned, while Heijun sternly reprimanded. The duty of a soldier is to protect the interests of civilization. The sacrifices of the soldiers on the Yunguang are to secure benefits for our civilization. Their deaths are meaningful, even necessary. Lu Went, I have said before that we must not consider issues solely from a military perspective. The military is merely an extension of politics. If you cannot grasp this principle, I seriously doubt your ability to hold the position of frontline commander. The reprimand was undeniably severe. Lu Went suppressed his anger and lowered his head heavily, saying, yes, I understand. Comfort the soldiers. The sacrifices of those on the Yunguang will be honored by civilization. Remember your mission. If anything goes wrong, I will hold you accountable. Yes. The meeting concluded. Lu Went let out a long sigh and began to plan the next steps. Previously, he had the opportunity to transition from a military leader to a government official. It was his inability to endure the various rules within the government system that led him to abandon that chance. He had thought that by being just a general, he could fulfill his ambitions without being constrained by regulations, but it now seemed that was not the case. I am just a pure soldier. I do not want to be a politician. Sigh. Inside the Hall of Peace, a new round of negotiations has begun. As soon as the members of both negotiation teams took their seats, the leader of the Blue Moon Civilization negotiation team, Lanxiang, immediately sensed that the atmosphere seemed a bit off. In the past, at the beginning of negotiations, both sides would engage in some polite small talk before entering a tense phase. It was unusual to see such long faces right from the start. What is going on? I hope it's not too presumptuous to ask, Commander Heijun, but you and your colleagues seem to be in a rather bad mood today. Lanxiang couldn't help but inquire. However, he noticed that the members of the South Star Civilization negotiation team looked at him simultaneously through their lightweight space helmets. Their eyes filled with sadness and hatred, leaving him utterly perplexed. Playing dumb, Heijun cursed inwardly but replied, we just received some news. Some of our loyal comrades have left us forever. He did not directly mention the incident involving the Yun Guang-class aerospace carrier. In negotiations involving two major civilizations, certain matters cannot be brought to the table. Once they are, it means there is no room for maneuvering, and the space for one side to negotiate benefits would diminish. Besides, both sides are already aware of the situation. What difference does it make to state it explicitly? It's enough to express one's stance and let the other side understand one's determination and needs. Chapter 163. Adding fuel to the fire. Facing Heijun's response, Lanxiang felt even more confused. Why should it matter to me if people from your civilization have died? Is it necessary to bring it up here and show us a long face? Isn't that unprofessional? Oh, really? That is truly unfortunate. I hope their souls can find peace in the celestial realm. Although dissatisfied, Lanxiang still offered a polite expression of condolence. However, it seemed that Heijun and his team were even angrier. What is going on? In the subsequent negotiations, the South Star Civilization side adopted an increasingly aggressive posture, making numerous demands in many areas that Lanxiang simply could not accept. Ultimately, this round of negotiations ended once again in a tense atmosphere filled with animosity, leaving both sides feeling quite dissatisfied. Back in their own conference room, Lanxiang vented, what is going on? Has that guy Heijun lost his mind? Using the excuse that someone from his civilization died. Is he trying to pressure us by adopting a mournful stance? Does he think he can pressure us? Those people didn't die because of us. What does it have to do with us? I suspect they have further tactics. We must stay vigilant. With this new variable today, the Blue Moon Civilization negotiation team engaged in extensive research and discussions, but until the end, they remained somewhat baffled and couldn't figure out what was really happening. At this moment, in the Wangliang star system, Chen Yu, who had been secretly observing the situation in the star system, was somewhat pleased to see that the South Star Civilization fleet had shown some encouraging changes. During this period, the South Star Civilization fleet began to frequently mobilize, and the military factories that had been idle resumed operations, entering a busy state. Numerous transport spacecraft were constantly shuttling between different bases, creating a scene of bustling activity, seemingly planning for some significant actions. The unusual movements of the Southern Star Fleet have clearly made the situation within Wang Liang's faction a bit tense. Accordingly, the Blue Moon Fleet has also taken some preliminary precautions, such as mobilizing their fleet and activating munitions factories. At this time, after some time of travel, the fleet that went to ambush the Cloudlight mothership has finally returned to their hiding place and joined the main forces. Cloudlight and others have also been transported here. Inside a life support ship, Cloudlight and several high-ranking officials of the mothership sensed that they seemed to have reached their destination, as they could no longer feel the acceleration or deceleration of the ship. The cessation of maneuvering naturally indicated that they had arrived. The group was somewhat anxious. Although their side speculated that they were merely captives exchanged for certain benefits and that their personal safety should not be an issue, it was still a civilization in a hostile state, and it was hard to say what kind of treatment they would receive. There is an ancient saying in our civilization: wise people do not confront the opponent when the situation is clearly unfavorable to them. When facing the Blue Moon civilization, a temporary compromise is necessary, and even some less important military secrets can be selectively disclosed. However, one point must be unified. Upon returning to our civilization, we must never admit that we have leaked military secrets. Cloudlight anxiously reminded his deputy, who immediately expressed agreement. One deputy said, "Maybe we are just scaring ourselves. After all, under normal circumstances, we high-ranking officials of the mothership wouldn't be detained together, but the Blue Moon civilization seems completely indifferent to this. Perhaps they want to even interrogate us. They might just keep us for a while and let us go after negotiations are reached. That would be best." Cloudlight's expression relaxed slightly, but he still felt a bit uneasy. After a moment, there was suddenly some noise outside the cabin, seemingly the sound of the ship docking. A little while later, the sound of the outer door opening came through. The group straightened up and stared intently at the door. If nothing unexpected happened, someone would soon come to meet them. Sure enough, the hatch slowly opened, and Cloudlight saw a group of figures. Why are some of them short and dark, with physiques similar to those of the Southern Star inhabitants? There were also some who, despite wearing spacesuits, appeared tall and thin, seemingly similar to the intelligent life forms of a vassal civilization of their Southern Star civilization, the Mozodi civilization. Cloudlight felt a mixture of suspicion and surprise, raising his head to see a Southern Star inhabitant smiling at him. What the heck? Isn't that Aodwa? Wasn't Aodwa supposed to be dead? Didn't he die in that solar system? How could he be here? And he looks like an interrogator? Did he capture me? What is going on? Aodwa, you. Cloudlight and several deputy captains were left speechless in shock. Aodwa, with a radiant smile on his face, introduced himself. "Let me introduce myself. I am Aodwa, the leader of the dwarven race of human civilization. This is Mo, the leader of the three-eyed race of human civilization." At the same time, the individual in charge also took responsibility for handling your situation. Stepping forward, with a long face and three eyes filled with smiles behind the space helmet, he said, "Captain Yun Guang and all the vice captains, let us contribute to human civilization together." For Chen Yu, dealing with Yun Guang and the others from the Southern Star was merely a trivial matter. Even if they chose to resist to the death, it would simply mean eliminating them directly, which was hardly worth mentioning. He handed the handling of Yun Guang and the others over to Aodwa and the individual in charge, showing no interest in the matter himself. His focus remained on the movements of the two major fleets in the Wangliang three-star system. At this moment, both fleets were estimated to have around 850,000 warships. Undoubtedly, this was an extremely formidable fighting force. Even though Chun Yu currently possessed over 100,000 warships, the technological gap between the two sides meant that he was no match for the 850,000 warships. Although Chun Yu could build more warships, the number he could control simultaneously was limited, which meant that the number of warships he could deploy to the battlefield at any given time was also limited. Therefore, reducing the combat power of the two civilizations became a necessary step. It was essential to reignite the conflict between them, to have them engage in mutual slaughter and expend their strength. Only after the total number of warships on both sides fell below 50,000 would Chun Yu have a greater assurance of being able to absorb both fleets. Yes, this was Chun Yu's plan, to absorb both fleets in one go. Only by doing so could he proceed with his subsequent plan to join the Interstellar Alliance and gain protection, thus securing the greatest benefit for human civilization. At this moment, the situation in the Wangliang three-star system was extremely tense. However, after observing for a while, Shin Yu found that both sides were mostly just posturing and did not seem inclined to engage in conflict. There's no other way. I have to add fuel to the fire, he thought to himself, having made up his mind. Chapter 164, Surprise Attack in the Wangliang three-star system. A vast base floated in the immense space, located hundreds of billions of kilometers away from two stars. The base had an irregular shape, somewhat resembling a spindle. It was constructed with dense docks, and hundreds of ships, large and small, continuously moved in and out of it. There were also some colossal ships, akin to aerospace carriers, capable of bringing hundreds of combat ships, making the place even busier. This was a logistics support base for the expedition fleet of the Blue Moon civilization. It not only stored a large amount of energy and supplies allocated from the civilization's homeland and resource star systems, but also undertook responsibilities such as treating injured personnel and repairing warships. The Blue Moon civilization had more than 20 such logistics support bases. Each one was under extremely tight protection and constantly maneuvered in space, changing its position. Their routes and coordinates were top-level secrets, known only to a handful of people within the entire expedition fleet. Originally, it was almost impossible for others to find them. For the same reason, the universe is too vast. Finding a leaf in a vast ocean is no easy task. Moreover, compared to the comparison between the ocean and leaves, the comparison between the immense space and a logistics support base is several orders of magnitude greater. However, now faced with Chun Yu's network of spy satellites numbering in the billions, even the deeply hidden logistics support base had to reveal its location. Chun Yu chose it as his next target for a surprise attack. Before the assault, Chun Yu had already figured out the military layout of this base. Surrounding it were approximately 130 small and medium-sized warships providing escort. If attacked, they only needed to hold out for 5 days before the nearest mobile fleet could arrive. Any large-scale fleet movement within a certain distance would inevitably leave traces that could be detected by their side, allowing them to respond calmly and allocate support forces in advance. Therefore, the Blue Moon civilization was not worried about a large-scale fleet assault here. If it were just a small fleet attack, those 130 small and medium-sized warships could hold out until the rescue fleet arrived. Even in the case of a long-range attack, such as launching a cluster of electromagnetic energy projectiles, they could receive early warnings and evade in advance, ensuring they would not enter an inescapable zone. Additionally, the location was sufficiently concealed, further enhancing security. From every angle, this seemed foolproof. However, Chun Yu did not intend to play by the book. The numerous spy satellites deployed in advance had already grasped the movement patterns of this logistics support base in detail. This made things easier. Chun Yu did not need to mobilize a large fleet to approach it. He simply needed to identify the patterns, calculate where it would be after a certain time, and then have his fleet lie in wait there. Ordinary third-level civilizations could not accomplish this because they lacked sufficient space search capabilities. They could not launch billions of detectors or continuously lock onto the location of the logistics support base. But for Chun Yu, achieving this was not only routine but also required minimal effort. Thus, the 3,000 warships that had been dispatched earlier quietly lay in wait like a pack of wolves hunting their prey. All the ships were in radio silence, emitting no visible light. At the same time, their hulls were coated with special paint that had an extremely low reflectivity to visible light. After waiting for a period, as Chun Yu had predicted, the logistics support base moved to a position about 20 million kilometers from the fleet, then slowed down and began to cruise slowly under inertia. At a distance of 20 million kilometers, even though the Blue Moon civilization's technology far surpassed Chun Yu's, they could not detect his fleet, which was already in a concealed state. Now it was time to act. With a command from Chun Yu, all 3,000 warships simultaneously activated maximum acceleration, 450 meters per second squared. In that instant, a gravitational force approximately 46 times that of Earth descended upon each ship. If there were any humans, dwarfs, or three-eyed beings inside the ships, under such immense gravity, they would be instantly crushed, their bones broken, and their internal organs forced out, leading to immediate death. Consider this. If an average person's weight is calculated at 70 kilograms, under 46 times the gravity of Earth, their weight would reach around 32 tons. Even the strongest person would be crushed under such a heavy weight. Their bones simply couldn't withstand it. A blue whale would be crushed by its own weight if it left the ocean. Under such immense gravity, humans would face the same fate. This presents a unique advantage for Chun Yu that others cannot match. He does not need to consider the endurance of intelligent life. He only needs to focus on the material strength of the spacecraft. Undoubtedly, special alloy steel can withstand far more than flesh and blood. With such tremendous acceleration, a distance of 20 million kilometers can be crossed in just about 2.5 hours. Just 2 minutes after the acceleration began, the logistics support base sprang into action. Clearly, they had detected this fleet. Considering the time for observation, decision-making, command transmission, and eventual execution, Qin Yu estimated that his fleet had only been active for about 20 seconds before being discovered. In Qin Yu's observation, the ships there suddenly became chaotic, and the escort warships hurriedly took off. Qin Yu paid no mind and continued to accelerate. When the distance between the two sides reduced to about 7 million kilometers, a full 3,000 warships simultaneously activated their electromagnetic energy cannons and began to fire in unison. Such a massive cluster of electromagnetic projectiles, at such close range, was already within the point of no return. Not to mention, Qin Yu could adjust the launch angles in real time. This was precisely the strategy Qin Yu intended to employ: strike decisively and then withdraw quickly, avoiding entanglement and wasting time. If the Blue Moon civilization discovered that it was not the Southern Star fleet attacking them, but an unknown fleet, it would be disastrous. Of course, under this strategy, the logistics support base and the remaining warships would undoubtedly be completely destroyed, and capturing prisoners would be out of the question. However, Qin Yu did not care. If he could capture some, that would be a bonus, but if not, killing them all was also acceptable. In this situation, before the two sides truly engaged, the massive cluster of electromagnetic projectiles had already reached its target, directly shattering the energy shield of the logistics support base and destroying the base itself. The remaining combat ships, no matter how advanced their performance, were utterly defenseless and were all cleanly destroyed. Qin Yu struck with precision. After that, the fleet did not slow down, maintaining a high speed as they directly withdrew from the battlefield. The entire ambush was over before the support fleet even had a chance to set out. Chapter 165. Strategic Wisdom in the Gliese 393 star system. The military commander of the Blue Moon civilization, Lan Xiang, wore a grim expression. In front of him, the supreme leader of the Blue Moon civilization, Lan Dian, and the commander of the expeditionary force, Hong Shan, were equally filled with anger. There was no doubt that this was an unmanned fleet. While unmanned fleets have significant limitations and cannot become the mainstream of the battlefield, they can serve as a surprise force under the right conditions and achieve great results if used effectively. The acceleration was so great that it could only be an unmanned fleet. If it were a crewed fleet, anyone aboard would be crushed. But Lan Xiang grew increasingly angry as he spoke. The key point lies in the appropriateness of this condition. The Southern Star civilization has created suitable application scenarios for their unmanned fleet, establishing the right conditions for its use. How did they create such appropriate conditions? Hong Shan and Lan Dian remained silent, but they were very clear in their hearts that among the many prerequisites, the most critical one was to understand the operational patterns of the logistics support base and to set up ambushes in advance. What does this imply? It means that if the Southern Star civilization hadn't developed super technology, they could only have infiltrated our internal ranks to obtain information from within. There are traitors within our ranks. This is a demonstration to gain more leverage at the negotiation table and to force our side to concede. The few of them quickly reached a consensus and made a judgment about the current incident. Lan Xiang also recalled the somewhat strange behavior of the Southern Star delegation in recent times. They were overly aggressive, suddenly adopting a hardline attitude and making more demands from our side. At the same time, they seemed certain that our side would back down, which left Lan Xiang puzzled. No matter how Lan Xiang thought about it, he couldn't find a reason for our side to retreat. Therefore, in recent negotiations, the atmosphere had grown increasingly tense, with no progress made. Originally, Lan Xiang had been unable to understand, but now he suddenly realized. It turned out they were waiting for him. The despicable Southerners had prepared such a big gift for our side. Perhaps, from the moment their attitudes suddenly changed, this matter had already been planned? At that time, they must have obtained the operational parameters of the logistics support base and preemptively dispatched the fleet to ambush there. No wonder their attitude became suddenly hardline. I propose reciprocal retaliation. We cannot let our soldiers die in vain. After careful consideration, the leader of the Blue Moon civilization, Lan Dian, shook his head indifferently. No, that would be meaningless and only lead to an uncontrollable situation. Although this military adventure is the Southern Star civilization flexing its muscles, it also exposes their urgency in negotiations. After an analysis, Lan Dian's judgment gained unanimous approval from the other two. The three of them ultimately made up their minds to seize the moral high ground in this matter and reclaim the lost interests at the negotiation table. Of course, there was still one thing to do before that. Our side must launch a purge within to root out that or those traitors. Such incidents must never happen again in the future. In the Hall of Peace, a new round of negotiations began again. Regarding the ownership of the seventh dwarf planet, Our side has different opinions. We believe that the originally agreed-upon mining rights ratio should be adjusted to 7-3. As for the reasons, you know in your hearts. Lord Heijan, I must warn you here that we have enough determination and capability to safeguard our interests. And every soldier we sacrifice will not die in vain. We have been enduring for the greater good of the negotiations. Do not think that our Blue Moon civilization is weak and can be bullied. Haiyan was furious upon hearing this. We fully respect the sovereignty and capabilities of the Blue Moon civilization, as well as your determination to protect your interests. However, our South Star civilization possesses the same abilities and resolve, and the blood of our warriors will not be shed in vain. The atmosphere was extremely tense as both sides were on edge. After a moment of confrontation, this round of negotiations ended once again in discord. Following the talks, countless messages were transmitted into the vast depths of space via super-distance communication technology. Supreme Commander, the other side is unyielding and clearly believes we are weak and can be easily bullied. They are ignoring our warnings. I propose we retaliate in kind. Chairman, not only is the other side unwilling to make concessions, but they also intend to overturn the previously agreed resolutions, taking advantage of our goodwill. We have already shown enough restraint, but they seem to disregard our sincerity. I propose we retaliate in kind. Lanxiang, both civilizations should resolve the disputes in the Wangliang star system through peaceful negotiations, which is a strategic mandate of civilization. Continuing military standoffs will benefit neither side. Remember, do not let personal feelings guide the negotiations. Haiyan, at times like this, it is even more crucial to maintain strategic composure. The more the other side provokes us, the more they expose their urgency. You must remain steady and not easily disrupt the hard-won peace talks, prioritizing the greater situation. In the Gliese 393 star system, tensions were escalating. Although negotiations were still ongoing, the frequency of discord was increasing. In no time, even the previously frequent concerts and tasting events had significantly diminished. In the Wangliang star system, Chunyu was still silently waiting. After 2 ambushes, he had sensed the shift in the situation within the star system. Both sides were increasingly mobilizing their fleets, creating an atmosphere of impending storm. Yet, quantitative changes could not trigger qualitative shifts. The transformations he anticipated had yet to materialize. Were these two civilizations merely impotent, only capable of foreplay, unable to proceed with the main event? After waiting for a while longer without any significant changes, Chinyu gradually came to a realization. If his ambushes were limited to this, they would not be sufficient to reignite conflict between the two sides. At that moment, he could not help but admire the leaders of both civilizations. There was only one possibility. The leaders had conducted a comprehensive strategic analysis of the current situation and recognized that peaceful negotiations remained the only means to resolve the disputes in the Wangliang star system. Military conflict was not an option. This also implied that the leaders of both civilizations possessed great prestige. Otherwise, how could they suppress the anger of their thousands of innocent soldiers who had perished? Indeed, those who could attain the highest leadership positions in a great civilization might have flaws and personal issues, but they could not be foolish. Each leader of these two civilizations possessed exceptional wisdom. In that moment, even Chunyu could not help but feel a sense of admiration for talent. If only he could draw them into human civilization and have them contribute to it. Chapter 166. Crisis. The fact that the leaders of the Southern Star Civilization and the Blue Moon Civilization possess extremely high intelligence is a good thing for their respective civilizations. But not for Chinyu himself. He must achieve the goal of making the fleets of the two major civilizations clash within the Wangliang 3-star system, thereby exhausting each other as strength. Only in this way can Chunyu execute his subsequent plans and fight for a glimmer of hope for the survival of human civilization. This is Chunyu's bottom line, something he must accomplish, leaving no room for compromise. However, Chunyu's current situation seems to be somewhat difficult. It truly caught me off guard. I calculated every possible angle, yet I did not anticipate that the leaders of their civilizations would possess such strategic vision and composure. If only one leader had this level of wisdom, it wouldn't be a problem. The other civilization's leader, lacking wisdom, would be forced to engage in war, regardless of how intelligent the first leader is. After all, one cannot just be beaten without retaliating. Internal dissent would be enough to dethrone him, rendering any prestige useless. What is truly concerning is if both leaders possess adequate wisdom. That would complicate matters. At this moment, Chinyu even harbors a subtle worry that the leaders of the two civilizations might deduce, from subtle clues, that there exists another force within the Wangliang 3-star system, and that all recent activities are being stirred up by that hidden force. If that were the case, he might have to face a joint assault from both civilizations. For Chinyu, while this wouldn't be a catastrophic disaster, it would completely disrupt his subsequent plans, plunging the fate of human civilization into turmoil. Given the current situation, this scenario is indeed possible. After all, The two civilizations have yet to discover him, primarily due to the lack of sufficient trust and communication between them. This is the only opportunity Chinyu can leverage. Once the leaders of the two civilizations, with their exceptional strategic vision, suppress the internal dissent and overcome this obstacle. If they communicate slightly and choose to trust each other based on their high strategic judgment, then the truth will inevitably come to light. Considering the capabilities currently displayed by the leaders of the two civilizations, this scenario is indeed quite likely. This stage represents my final opportunity. It must be seized. I need to ensure that they are plunged into a comprehensive conflict before they realize what is happening. I can no longer engage in minor skirmishes. I must take decisive action. Chinyu truly feels the crisis he is facing at this moment. While establishing models and beginning simulations to calculate various plans, Chinyu convenes Aodhwa, Majwa, and others for another emergency high-level meeting. After executing a sneak attack on both the Southern Star Civilization and the Blue Moon Civilization, we can almost confirm that both fleets have entered a state of alert. It may not be easy to carry out another sneak attack, and we could even risk falling into an ambush. This is the predicament that human civilization currently faces. Once trapped in an ambush, there is no guarantee that our warships will not be captured. Even if they are not captured, if the enemy retrieves the wreckage of the warship, it will be easy to discover that these are unmanned spacecraft and that the technology system is different from theirs. In this way, our side will be immediately exposed. No matter what, we cannot expose ourselves at this stage. Chinyu established this major premise. Odu hesitated and said, "We still have 85 South Star ships captured from the Yunguang spacecraft carrier group, as well as some captured South Star people. If we deploy these ships, we can avoid exposing ourselves. However, with just these few ships, it will be difficult to achieve any tactical objectives." Odu's words inspired Chinyu. He pondered carefully, and a new plan gradually took shape in his mind. There were a total of 365 captives from the Yunguang spacecraft carrier, among which 229 expressed their willingness to submit, while the remaining 136 refused to do so. Chinyu slowly said, "Since those who refuse to submit have made their choice, they can go to their deaths. We do not have the time or energy to waste on them." Chinyu was clear that even those who chose to submit could not be counted on for loyalty. Faced with a completely unfamiliar civilization, how could there be loyalty? Even if they submitted, loyalty must be built slowly. However, at least those who showed a preliminary attitude could be spared. As for those who refused to submit, Chinyu decided they should be left to their fate. Should they all be executed? No, Chinyu coldly stated. Their deaths should hold more value. With the help of intelligent beings, Chinyu's plan was finally perfected. Under his command, the 136 South Star warriors who refused to submit were all taken away by robots. The submissive Yunguang watched as the cold robots took away one subordinate after another. Feeling a chill in his heart, looking at Odu, who was once his subordinate, and Majwa, whose fate he could once easily control with a word, Yunguang instantly revealed a flattering smile. "Commander Odu, Commander Majwa, please do not ask what should not be asked." Majwa immediately scolded him. Yunguang's smile became even more humble. "Yes." Observing the anxious and flattering Yunguang, both Odu and Majwa felt a sense of satisfaction. Indeed, the tides had turned. The once proud Captain Yunguang now resembled a sycophant. While Odu and Majwa felt pleased, they also clearly recognized a reality. In terms of ability, they were not particularly outstanding. To maintain their position within human civilization, the only thing they could boast of was loyalty. Loyalty was the foundation of their existence. Both of them were acutely aware that their personal interests and those of their entire race were now highly tied to human civilization. Even if human civilization were to face defeat in the future, and they had a chance to return to their original civilization, they would never be able to go back. Once on the ship, there was no getting off. Their only fate was to sail together into the unknown future with this great ship of human civilization. In their hearts, they silently reaffirmed their determination to be loyal to human civilization. At this moment, the 136 captives who refused to submit were once again brought back to their original spaceship by robots. At this stage, these spaceships had been modified by Chinyu and could now be remotely controlled by him. Although the convenience was not comparable to those he made himself, and their combat capabilities could not be fully realized, it was already more than sufficient for Chinyu. Chapter 167. The honest man's trap. Returning to the spaceship where he had fought and lived for decades, the South Star warriors felt a mix of emotions. At the same time, they were somewhat fearful, unsure of what the enemy intended to do by bringing them back here. Faced with these stubborn individuals, Chinyu showed no mercy. Some anesthetic gas was released, and the South Star warriors immediately fell unconscious. Afterwards, Chinyu manipulated the robots to place them back in their original combat positions, such as observation posts, electromagnetic energy cannon observation points, firing positions, and repair rooms. Once everything was completed, One of the ships from this small fleet of 84 warships was intercepted by Chunyu, kept for future reverse research, and quietly set out into the vastness of space. Along the way, this small fleet split into 12 even smaller fleets, each consisting of only 7 warships. Each of these microfleets headed in different directions. The navigation target for each fleet was a heavy transport ship from the Blue Moon civilization. Chunyu had previously confirmed the travel trajectories of these 12 transport ships during his covert observations. After a period of time, they would set sail from Resource Planet No. 6, fully loaded with various supplies, heading towards several logistics support bases. The cargo they carried would be unloaded there for the personnel at those bases to rest, receive treatment, repair warships, and replenish combat supplies. In the most covert manner and at the lowest power, the 12 microfleets quietly lurked at the edges of the transport ships' routes, beginning their silent wait. Before long, the 12 heavy transport ships each set sail accompanied by 3 escort warships as scheduled. Originally, their routes were classified, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to discover them. However, under the detection network composed of billions of spy satellites, they were thoroughly exposed, with precise calculations and prior arrangements. Almost simultaneously, the 12 heavy transport ships entered the attack range of the 12 microfleets. At that moment, Chunyu had no hesitation and immediately remotely controlled the 84 warships to launch an attack. A large number of electromagnetic cannon projectiles rained down, along with laser cannons, electromagnetic interference shells, micro-interstellar missiles, and various other weapons, unleashing a full barrage. The previously silent interstellar space suddenly became lively. However, in the face of the sudden attack, the 12 heavy transport ships showed no signs of panic. Chunyu observed that even before his forces' attack reached them, the heavy transport ships had already raised energy shields, and the 3 escort warships immediately launched a counterattack, seemingly well prepared. A trap. The thought flashed through Chunyu's mind. As Chunyu had anticipated, the moment the battle commenced, the detection network immediately identified over 20 bright flashes appearing in the previously empty interstellar space. These were the flashes that could only be emitted by interstellar warships maneuvering at full power. At this moment, even a fool could understand that the 3 escort warships were merely a superficial escort force. In the shadows, at least 20 more warships were concealed, ready to rush over to provide escort as soon as an ambush was encountered. If you can set an ambush, we can lay traps and then execute a counter-ambush. Within just 1 or 2 hours, our 12 warships were unable to break through the energy shield of the heavy transport ship. But after 1 or 2 hours, the electromagnetic energy projectiles from the counter-ambush warships had already arrived. Chunyu decisively maneuvered these warships, abandoning the ambush and immediately engaging in full-power maneuvers, attempting to escape. However, the escort fleet of the lunar civilization clearly was not willing to let them go. They too engaged in full-power maneuvers, pursuing and attacking, forcing Chunyu into a desperate situation with no way out. It was absurd, after preparing for so long and being on high alert. How could they easily let the enemy escape now that the trap had finally lured them in? In the end, helplessly, these 84 warships were destroyed one by one, exploding into a brilliant firework in the dark void of space. The South Star warriors who had been placed in combat positions but were in a state of induced coma also lost their lives alongside the destruction of the warships. Chunyu could be 100% certain of this. It was no joke. If these people survived, how could Chunyu allow them to fall into the hands of the lunar civilization? At this moment, Chunyu's plan came to an end. The developments had proceeded as expected, without any surprises for Chunyu. Next, it was time to wait for the situation to unfold. Chunyu's actions this time seemed simple, but they were backed by profound strategic considerations. In simple terms, Chunyu had now given up on directly provoking a large-scale conflict through a surprise attack. Given the high intelligence and strategic vision of the leaders on both sides, this was unrealistic. The only thing Chunyu could do was change his approach and achieve his goals through a more convoluted plan. This kind of plan had been studied in the human world back in the day. Chunyu referred to it as the honest person trap. At this moment, the impact of the South Star fleet's renewed surprise attack on their side was slowly fermenting within the lunar civilization. When the news of the transport fleet being ambushed again reached Red Mountain, the commander of the Lunar Expeditionary Force, he was filled with rage. This South Star civilization was simply relentless. The last surprise attack had caused such heavy losses, and they had suppressed it for the sake of negotiations. Yet now they were attacking again. Fortunately, we were already prepared. In this battle, we completely annihilated a total of 12 small fleets of the enemy, consisting of 84 warships. Our transport ship and warships suffered varying degrees of damage, with one requiring major repairs, while the other warships were damaged, but not severely. One participant died during the repair process, with 96 others injured, but there was no threat to life. At the cost of severely damaging one of their warships, The enemy lost a total of 84 ships, which undoubtedly counts as a significant victory. Hongshan's mood improved slightly. He immediately ordered the salvage of the enemy's wreckage for detailed analysis. For some time, Hongshan had a lingering question that he had kept to himself, unable to shake it off. As a frontline military commander, he had a gut feeling that there might be another unknown military force within the Wangliang Samsung system. Recently, when their logistics support base was attacked, he wondered if this was the work of that unknown force rather than the Nanqing civilization. If that were the case, it would make much more sense, as Hongshan could not find any justifiable reason for the Nanqing civilization to act in such a manner at this stage. Chapter 168. Equitable Retaliation. Field Marshal Lan Xiang and President of the civilization, Lan Dian, both viewed this ambush as a military gamble made due to irreconcilable internal conflicts within the enemy, which did not affect the overall peace negotiations. However, Hongshan always felt that something was off. He had no evidence, just a hunch, a gut feeling of a frontline commander. Therefore, he ordered an increase in detection efforts within the galaxy, trying to find evidence of a third-party force, but so far, there had been no results. At this moment, the enemy had finally been completely annihilated, leaving behind wreckage. If this was indeed the work of a third-party force, then the evidence must be hidden there. After such a long time, the Lan Yu civilization had also captured a significant amount of wreckage from the Nanqing civilization. He was quite familiar with the warships of the Nanqing civilization. Following Hongshan's orders, a large quantity of wreckage was quickly salvaged and sent to a specialized research lab. Soon, the inspection report was presented to him. The analysis showed that all the wrecks belonged to the Nanqing civilization's second-tier warships. Moreover, they found a considerable number of broken bodies inside the wreckage. Genetic testing confirmed them to be remains of intelligent life from the Nanqing civilization. These were indeed genuine Nanqing warships, and the bodies were also unquestionably those of Nanqing individuals. There was no doubt about it, and Hongshan had to temporarily dismiss his suspicions. Next came the post-war assessment. Upon entering the conference room, the military high command was in an uproar, filled with anger. We tolerated the first ambush, but a second one. Luckily, we were prepared in advance. So the losses weren't severe, but who can bear such a thing? Commander, let's launch an equitable retaliation. We can't keep enduring like this. The enemy will think we are weak and easy to bully. Commander, our internal intelligence leaks are too severe. How did the enemy obtain the transport ship's route data this time? It needs to be thoroughly investigated. Hongshan remained silent, and at the end of the meeting, he finally said, I will report the specifics to the president and the field marshal. For now, we must maintain strict vigilance and prevent further ambushes. Meeting adjourned. Returning to his office, Hongshan sent out a communication request. After a while, the screen displayed the figures of President Lan Dian and Field Marshal Lan Xiang. Hongshan finally Zhongliled Yi Sha Yuyan and detailed the events that occurred today. After that, Hongshan sat upright and said nothing. Lan Dian and Lan Xiang also showed no signs of anger. Instead, they each furrowed their brows and fell into deep thought. After a long while, Lan Xiang slowly said, Hongshan, have you confirmed whether the fleet that came to launch the surprise attack is indeed from the Southern Star civilization? Hongshan's eyes narrowed slightly. It was clear that Grand Marshal Lan Xiang shared the same suspicion, believing that within Wang Liang's three-star system, there was a certain possibility of a third force. It had been confirmed that it was indeed the fleet of the Southern Star civilization. I was overthinking it. Lan Xiang shook his head slightly. Although we won the battle, strategically, we lost a round. After all, we still have not grasped how the enemy obtained our top-secret intelligence. Overall, this surprise attack was still a show of force, attempting to pressure us into concessions at the negotiating table. From a higher perspective, I believe the Southern Star civilization still has sincerity for peace negotiations. This attack was also merely a military adventure and does not affect the overall situation. This is my basic judgment. Lan Dian slowly nodded. I agree with your assessment. Hongshan then said, but I believe this time, we cannot remain passive any longer. Lan Dian sighed. To ensure the situation does not spiral out of control, and to bring the negotiations back on track, we have no choice but to take action. Hongshan, I agree to your plan for reciprocal retaliation. Yes, Hongshan understood that last time, they had held back and did not retaliate, only applying pressure at the negotiating table to ensure the overall peace talks were not disrupted. However, now that the enemy had launched a second surprise attack, it was clear they were deviating from the correct path. They had to implement reciprocal retaliation to try to bring the enemy back on track, still for the purpose of ensuring the peace talks were not undermined. The goal remained consistent, but at different stages and in different situations, their responses would vary. After communicating with the higher-ups, Hongshan immediately issued the order. Thus, a fleet from the Blue Moon civilization quietly set sail towards the controlled area of the Southern Star civilization. This movement was quickly detected by Qinyu. Qinyu felt a surge of excitement and let out a long sigh of relief. Finally succeeded. This is the trap of the honest people. The robot representing Chun Yu slowly spoke to the nearby Outwa Majwa and others. In a group, if everyone is honest and diligently works for the group, it will be most beneficial for the group as a whole, and to some extent, for the individuals within it as well. The group will develop better and better. However, if a bad person appears within this group, being deceitful and engaging in trickery, in the short term, this bad person will gain far more than the honest individuals. If this bad person cannot be removed from the group, then the interests of the honest individuals will suffer greatly. If they do not want their interests to be harmed, what should the honest individuals do? Unfortunately, no matter what they do, the interests of the honest individuals will inevitably be compromised. The only way to protect one's own interests from being harmed is to become a bad person as well. If you are bad, then I must be worse than you to ensure my own benefits. In this way, the group will fall into a competition of degradation, ultimately turning all honest individuals into bad people and then restoring a balance. This is the trap of honest people. Returning to the current situation, this sneak attack was merely a minor incident and did not cause any significant damage to the Blue Moon civilization. While it may seem meaningless, it allows the Blue Moon civilization to conclude that the other party will continue to apply pressure using such methods. Initially, everyone was sincere about negotiations, acting openly and honestly, with all differences resolved at the negotiation table. This was the best for both the whole and the individuals. Now, however, the Southern Star civilization has begun to frequently resort to underhanded tactics, using such vile means to secure benefits. If our civilization continues to be honest, won't we end up at a disadvantage? Since you have transformed from honest individuals into bad ones, we cannot afford to remain honest without suffering losses. To protect our interests, we too must become bad. Chapter 169. Upgrade. Chun Yu understood that under normal circumstances, even if both sides turned into bad people, as long as both still had the sincerity to negotiate, the situation would likely remain controllable. Both sides would actively control the intensity of the conflict, keeping it within a small scale and preventing it from escalating into a large-scale conflict. Even with the previous sneak attack resulting in the Southern Star civilization losing a space carrier and the Blue Moon civilization losing a logistical support base, a large-scale conflict would not occur. But now, with Chun Yu present, with me stirring the pot behind the scenes, do you still think you can control the intensity of the conflict? Dream on. As a result, the relationship and mutual trust between the two sides will show a spiraling decline, and ultimately, once they reach their limit, both sides will lose patience and a major war will reignite. In this entire scheme, the most challenging aspect is to make one side take the initiative to retaliate against the other equally. It is like trying to destroy a long dam. The hardest part is the first step, making a hole in that dam. Once this hole is opened, the subsequent flow of water will naturally expand it. Now, through the captured warships of the Southern Star civilization and the lives of the die-hard elements among the captives, Chun Yu has already opened this hole. Next, he will just wait and see how things unfold, and intervene if necessary. Looking at Otto and Mo Zhu, who stood nearby with admiration on their faces, Chun Yu felt a bit disappointed. He sensed that these individuals had not provided him with much help during this incident, and had not fulfilled the role he hoped intelligent life could play. Ultimately, he still had to rely on himself to devise the entire strategy. Their loyalty and military prowess were commendable, but other aspects were just mediocre. Chun Yu thought to himself, if possible, he should strive to bring the leaders of the two great civilizations into his camp, allowing them to contribute to the development of human civilization. Chun Yu had genuinely felt the gap between his subordinates and the leaders of two major civilizations. It was understandable. Before joining the human civilization, Outwa was just a mid-level military officer. Majwa could be considered a high-ranking military figure, but he was only from a secondary civilization, so his perspective was inevitably limited. This group of makeshift personnel could manage daily operations, but it was unrealistic to expect them to have a high level of strategic vision. Chun Yu knew that he himself did not possess such strategic insight either. The reason he had not faltered was entirely due to his high computational power, which allowed him to think through every aspect of each decision, achieving a similar effect. To put it another way, individuals with sufficient wisdom and strategic vision are like those who are lucky enough to win the lottery. Every time they buy a ticket, they can either rely on luck or their judgment to accurately choose the winning ticket. Chun Yu lacked such wisdom and luck, but he was wealthy enough. Every time he bought a lottery ticket, he would purchase every possible combination, ensuring that he would win every time. This could be seen as achieving the same goal through different paths. However, there was a difference between the two. Sometimes, when faced with extremely complex situations, he could not exhaustively enumerate every choice and its consequences, nor could he fully simulate reality. In such cases, it was necessary to have someone with sufficient wisdom and strategic vision to make judgments. Having secretly decided on the subsequent direction of development, Chun Yu turned his attention back to the changes in the situation within the Wangliang 3-star system. The stealth fleet dispatched by the Blue Moon civilization had been under his close observation and monitoring. He quietly watched as it set off directly, using various covert methods to quietly approach a logistics support base of the Southern Star civilization. The battle suddenly erupted. Like the Blue Moon civilization, Yu could see that the Southern Star civilization had also been on high alert during this time. This ambush met with fierce resistance from well-prepared defensive forces. Ultimately, what started as a sneak attack evolved into a direct confrontation, with both sides sustaining injuries. In the end, only a portion of the Blue Moon civilization fleet managed to escape in a panic, while the Southern Star civilization also suffered significant damage. In the Gliese 393 system, in the Hall of Peace, the military leader of the Southern Star civilization, Heijun, felt a surge of anger upon receiving the latest battle report from the front lines. Initially, Heijun had suspected that there might be a hidden force within the Wangliang 3-star system that was instigating infighting between both sides to reap the benefits. But now, concrete evidence lay before him. They had even found the remains of Blue Moon individuals, and the warships were unmistakably theirs. What more was there to doubt? We have already tolerated this once. One space battleship was destroyed, and we endured it. That should show our sincerity, right? Yet you dare to launch another ambush? How much longer will this continue? Do you think our civilization is easy to bully? We were negotiating in good faith, and you had to play dirty tricks, didn't you? Since you are unkind, don't blame me for being unjust. Speaker, I propose reciprocal retaliation. We can't endure this any longer. We are sincere. We are honest. But in this situation, the more honest we are, the more we suffer. The speaker of the Southern Star civilization, Bing Yuntian, furrowed his brow and pondered for a long time before finally, sighing and slowly saying, negotiations must continue. However, the Blue Moon people are truly unreasonable. So let's retaliate in kind. Be sure to control the intensity and scope of the conflict. We must not let a small-scale clash escalate into a full-blown war. It hasn't been easy to reach this point, so we can't afford to destroy it lightly. I understand. Yu was delighted to see that, following their previous action, the situation within the Wangliang 3-star system had shown encouraging changes. Both sides began to send fleets to each other. Today you attacked my logistics base, and tomorrow I will strike your resource planet. Today you ambushed my transport ship, and tomorrow I will dare to take down your small fleet. The exchanges were lively, but it was clear that both sides were intentionally controlling the intensity, obviously not wanting the conflict to escalate. Faced with this situation, Yu decisively took action and mixed in among the back-and-forth fleets, taking down an important base from each side. As expected, following this incident, the intensity and scale of the conflict between both sides rose to a new level. The previously calm Wangliang 3-star system became lively once again. Just as Yu was considering ways to further escalate the intensity, an unexpected incident suddenly occurred. Due to frequent movements from both sides, a fleet from the Blue Moon civilization, consisting of around 1,000 warships, unexpectedly encountered a fleet from the Southern Star civilization, which had approximately 1,500 warships. Perhaps due to the deep-seated grudges, one of the warships from the Blue Moon fleet unexpectedly activated its electromagnetic energy cannon and fired off several hundred rounds. Ship 713,156. What are you doing? At that moment, the frantic voice of the fleet commander came through the public command channel. In that instant, the captain of Ship 6 felt a jolt and nervously looked at the deputy captains beside him. The captains exchanged glances, and after a moment, they realized what had just happened. We stop. Do not attack. Do not attack. The captain of Ship 6 hurriedly issued new orders. His heart felt like it was in his throat, nearly jumping out. Given the current sensitivity of the situation and the ongoing conflicts, his earlier attack could easily lead to misunderstandings. If his action caused an unnecessary battle, it would be disastrous. However, unexpectedly, his command was heard by the overall commander, who responded with another round of scolding. It's already been fired. What's the use of stopping now? Prepare for a full-scale attack. Once the first electromagnetic energy projectile was fired, the situation became irreversible, and what would happen next was already determined. Since that was the case, they could only seize the initiative and launch a full-scale attack before the enemy was ready. Hopefully, they could end this battle before reinforcements arrived. As anticipated by the commander, following the initial attack by the Southern Star Civilization fleet, the Blue Moon Civilization fleet, located millions of kilometers away, began its offensive in the shortest possible time. Numerous military reconnaissance satellites were deployed, and a large number of interstellar mines left the warships like a swarm, quickly dissolving into the vast, dark expanse of space. Countless bright flashes began to appear. Among these flashes, some trailed long or short tails, indicating interstellar missiles of varying sizes. Others had no tails, representing different types of electromagnetic energy projectiles. The scale of this interstellar battle, involving over 2,000 warships, was entirely different from engagements that involved only dozens or even just a few warships. Such large-scale interstellar combat emphasized the importance of intelligence gathering and coordination. Therefore, military reconnaissance satellites were indispensable. Thousands of these satellites would be deployed into the battlefield to autonomously collect information and relay it to the command center, supporting the commander in making judgments and directing operations. Each warship also had to abandon the mentality of acting alone and must integrate into the larger whole. A disorganized force could not win any battle. In response to the full-scale counterattack from the Blue Moon civilization, the Southern Star civilization also had to adopt a fully committed stance. They too began deploying a large number of military satellites and interstellar mines to prepare for close combat. The previously silent and cold starry sky suddenly erupted into chaos. The battle had begun. This scene was immediately captured by Chun Yu's observation equipment, and relevant information was swiftly transmitted to the human vessel. The intelligent beings on board were instantly filled with joy and excitement, and Chun Yu felt a sense of relief. After planning and strategizing for so long, and undertaking so many actions in secret, they were finally reaping the rewards. Chun Yu had long anticipated this situation. It was a classic case of a spark igniting a fire. Small-scale conflicts, even when both sides tried to control them, often led to unexpected escalations. Once an incident occurred, the conflict would escalate uncontrollably, drawing both parties into a larger confrontation. Such occurrences had happened countless times throughout human civilization's history. Chun Yu understood that just as human civilization could not avoid accidental conflicts leading to major wars, neither could the Southern Star civilization and the Blue Moon civilization. A new, all-encompassing war affecting the entire Wangliang star system had become inevitable. In matters of war, while people can decide when to start, they cannot control when it will end. Now that the battle had begun, it would not cease unless one side surrendered or both sides reached a stalemate, unable to continue fighting. In this battle, the Southern Star civilization had 500 warships, while the Blue Moon civilization had only 000, and that fleet had already been on a long mission, resulting in insufficient supplies. This should be the 6th division of the Crimson Fleet under the Blue Moon civilization. The fleet's warships are generally over 200 years old, and the soldiers have only received basic training, barely qualifying as a second-tier fleet. Compared to elite fleets, their weaponry, logistical support, and personnel quality are all lacking. How can they hope to win this battle? In my view, their annihilation is not unexpected. However, Aodo confidently stated, there will definitely be unexpected developments. The civilization in question would not stand by and watch their 6th fleet be destroyed. They would certainly send reinforcements. Likewise, the opposing civilization would not remain passive and would also dispatch support. Both sides keep escalating their efforts, ultimately bringing all available military forces into play. Chun Yu calmly remarked, the events that follow no longer require our intervention. We should just observe, as Chun Yu had predicted and hoped for. The 6th fleet of the civilization quickly fell into a disadvantage during this conflict, facing the risk of total destruction. Consequently, nearby military forces, such as the 5th and 7th fleets of the Crimson Fleet and the 2nd Fleet of the Deep Blue Fleet, immediately rushed to provide support. The opposing civilization also began to mobilize their forces. The situation in the Wangliang 3-star system was completely ignited by just a few hundred electromagnetic projectiles. Like flashes the size of houses, millions, even tens of millions, erupted simultaneously in the Wangliang 3-star system, continuing day and night. Countless warships were torn apart, and debris flew wildly through the star system. Numerous severed limbs and remains were blasted out of the ships, freezing into hard chunks within a short time. Millions of military reconnaissance satellites engaged in fierce battles along the intelligence front, with at least 60% being destroyed daily, yet even more were continuously replenished. Swarms of interstellar mines roamed freely in space, rushing towards any detected targets, ready to self-destruct to obliterate the enemy. Beams of laser crisscrossed the universe, and flashes from hydrogen bomb explosions emerged continuously. Affected by the war, the 2 stars in the Wangliang 3-star system, which had calmed down slightly, began to rage again, with fierce stellar winds sweeping across the entire system. Chapter 171. Desperate struggle in a very short time. Both sides, filled with immense anger, pushed the war into a white-hot phase. The entire star system seemed to be boiling, far over 100 billion kilometers away. Chun Yu could clearly sense the intensity of the war. However, if he were to observe this star system with just the equivalent of human eyesight, a completely different scene would unfold. The 2 bright stars ahead remained quiet, with the stars still twinkling as usual, and the universe remained vast and profound. No signs of the large-scale battle could be detected. The vastness of the universe could overshadow any significant commotion caused by even the most advanced civilization. Sometimes, Chun Yu would have such a sentiment. The vast, deep, and tranquil universe he sees might be filled with countless events happening beyond his knowledge. Perhaps at this very moment, there are advanced civilizations engaged in fierce battles that are too unimaginable for him, and due to the limitations of technology, he cannot even sense such conflicts. This thought added a sense of urgency to his heart. After a moment of contemplation, his attention returned to the war before him, quietly observing and waiting for the right opportunity. At this moment, light years away in the Gliese 393 star system, within the Hall of Peace, the military marshal of the Blue Moon Civilization, Lan Xiang, and the military leader of the Southern Star Civilization, He Zhan, simultaneously received shocking news. In the Wangliang 3-star system, the two sides had once again engaged in a fierce battle. After understanding the details of the situation, both could only sigh. Once war breaks out, it is certainly not something that can be resolved in a short time. Moreover, fighting a battle might not be such a bad thing after all. During this time, He Zhan had had enough of the other side's arrogance and rudeness in negotiations. As a military leader, he was also fed up with the other side's constant underhanded tactics. Teaching them a lesson before resuming negotiations seemed like a good plan. What he did not know was that not far from him, Lan Xiang had the same thought. Negotiations were still ongoing, with both sides maintaining a frequency of starting a round of talks every few days. During this phase, while there was intense fighting in the Wangliang 3-star system, the atmosphere between the two sides in the Gliese 393-star system seemed to grow increasingly amicable. There was no longer any sharp confrontation at the negotiation table, nor was there any tension. Whenever a disagreement arose, both sides would intuitively pause the discussion. Sometimes, at the serious negotiation table, both sides would even chat about lighter topics like different customs. Neither side was in a hurry, nor could they afford to be. Everyone understood that until the war's outcome was revealed, everything discussed at the negotiation table would be meaningless. For now, they would just go through the motions, waiting for the war's results to be announced. The negotiation teams of the two great civilizations were not anxious, nor was Chunyu. And even the warring parties in the Wangliang 3-star system were not in a hurry. Chunyu was not anxious because he had enough time to wait for the right moment to arise. The warring parties in the Wangliang 3-star system were not anxious either, as both commanders understood that such a total war could not yield results in a short period. Time passed quickly. Hidden among the vast starry sky, Chunyu quietly observed this war, using the expanse of the universe as a cover. He watched both sides displaying their wits, maneuvering troops, and fleets clashing in space, witnessing countless lives lost. Initially, the total number of warships from both sides was about 780,000. Now, 5 years later, after 5 years of fierce combat, the total number of warships had dwindled to around 560,000. Over the 5 years, 220,000 warships and at least 5 million soldiers had lost their lives. But that was not enough. Chunyu remained unhurried, still quietly waiting, regardless of the lack of resources and the inability to conduct sufficient physical experiments. Chunyu still had plenty to occupy himself with, numerous problems to calculate and research, and would not waste time idly. After another 2 years, both sides seemed to be somewhat exhausted, and their offensives had slowed down. This situation was intolerable for Chunyu. Seizing the opportunity, he boldly struck, launching a surprise attack on a relatively important target for both sides, and successfully reigniting their fighting spirit. Thus, the great battle resumed. Chunyu, having achieved his goal, withdrew and quietly observed the splendid performance from the vastness of space. This performance was indeed captivating, especially for the onlookers like Otto and Emoju. During this time, under the guidance of the leaders of the two great races, the captives taken from the Yunguang spacecraft had fully submitted to human civilization, recognized their fate, and began to actively contribute to their future. Otto no longer had just a few strays under his command. He had established his own faction, solidifying his position as the leader of his race. To this end, Chunyu allocated a living spaceship specifically for the dwarfs. Among the thousands of individuals, some with military talent were selected to join the military advisory group. Thus, the military advisory group, led by Otto, and the one led by Emoju, began to simulate battlefield situations from the perspectives of the Southern Star Civilization and the Blue Moon Civilization, engaging in mutual opposition. Whenever the fleets of the two civilizations on the real battlefield made moves that contradicted their predictions, discussions and analyses were held within the advisory groups to explore the reasons behind the fleet commanders' decisions. Was it a misjudgment on the part of the commanders? Or did they have deeper intentions, making more reasonable and far-reaching arrangements that their side had yet to comprehend? Through this model, the strategic skills of the members of the two racial military advisory groups began to improve rapidly. After all, both Hongshan and Liu were top military strategists of a genuine third-level civilization. Learning directly from these two was bound to accelerate their progress. This situation continued for a full 3 years. The fighting spirit stirred by Chunyu gradually waned once again after prolonged and brutal battles. This time, Yu did not intend to provoke them again. After 10 years of harsh combat, the total number of warships on both sides had decreased to 380,000. With his own fleet of over 100,000 warships facing 380,000, Yu was now confident of victory. It was time to initiate the next phase of the plan. Chapter 172. Cut off in the vast and deep space, a communication relay station, roughly spherical in shape, quietly floated. Above it was a line of distorted characters resembling chaotic lines. Yu knew these were the words of the Southern Star civilization. The meaning of this line of characters was 22681135. This is the identifier for the relay station in the communication link. Its exterior is black, blending seamlessly with the cosmic background. Moreover, its surface is coated with a special paint that effectively absorbs electromagnetic waves across various frequency bands. Coupled with the vast emptiness of space, these factors contribute to its astonishing stealth capabilities. It lacks even an energy shield and has only a thin layer of armor. Aside from a certain resistance to radiation to protect its internal equipment, it has almost no defense against any type of attack. A small electromagnetic energy projectile could easily penetrate it. Describing it as thin shell with a large filling is entirely appropriate. However, this is not due to the manufacturers of the civilization being careless or neglecting its safety. Rather, it is because the probability of being discovered in this vast space is exceedingly low, making extensive defensive facilities unnecessary. Now, a military attack satellite has quietly set its sights on it. This military attack satellite is unlike the small reconnaissance satellites previously launched. Those reconnaissance satellites weigh only about 10 kilograms and are extremely compact. In contrast, this military attack satellite weighs a hefty 600 kilograms. Equipped with its own propulsion system and even a small electromagnetic energy cannon, the creator has produced hundreds of thousands of such military attack satellites, which were dispersed into the vastness of space decades ago, set in motion towards predetermined coordinates. Over the years, the billions of reconnaissance satellites have conducted 2 comprehensive sweeps of the spherical shell region, measuring 2 to 4 light-years from a specific point. The creator is confident that all relay stations in the vastness of space belonging to the 2 major civilizations have been found. This represents an unprecedented achievement. Before the creator, no civilization had ever conceived of such an idea. Yet now, in silence, and without the awareness of the 2 major civilizations, this has been accomplished. The final search results indicate that there are a total of 368,536 relay stations in this spherical region of space released by the 2 civilizations. Currently, an equal number of military attack satellites have positioned themselves, lurking around the corresponding relay stations, maintaining near real-time communication with the creator through their own communication links using advanced methods. At this moment, the timing to intervene in the war between the 2 civilizations has matured. Amidst the cheers of countless intelligent beings, the creator decisively issued the command. After decades of waiting, these intelligent beings are eager to act. With the command received, the hidden military attack satellites instantly revealed their presence. The barrels of the electromagnetic energy cannons emerged, easily locking onto the relay stations located hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, and simultaneously began firing. Faced with the ferocious electromagnetic projectiles, these relay stations, with their thin armor, have no capacity to resist. As soon as the electromagnetic energy projectiles made contact, they immediately released energy comparable to that of powerful explosives, engulfing everything in a massive and searing blaze in an instant. These military attack satellites are merely consumables on the real battlefield. With hundreds of thousands of units, they would likely be depleted within a day given the intensity of the current battlefield in the region. However, for these communication relay stations, they were truly harbingers of death. The explosive energy of the electromagnetic projectiles may not be enough to vaporize the materials constituting the communication relay stations, but shattering them into pieces and rendering them completely non-functional was a trivial matter. In an instant, over 300,000 communication relay stations vanished in bright flashes of light. Due to the vastness of the universe, these flashes were perfectly concealed, unnoticed by any entities except for one. From that moment on, the entire region was isolated, becoming a black zone for both civilizations. At the same time, aside from civilian ships such as residential and research vessels, Yu's massive fleet, consisting of over 100,000 ships, simultaneously activated their maximum acceleration. Countless bright tails appeared in the vastness of space. However, due to their high directional focus, these flashes also went undetected by the fleets of the 2 civilizations at the core of the galaxy. Yu understood that regardless of how focused their direction was, it was only a matter of time before they were detected by the 2 fleets. After all, the distance between both sides was merely over 100 billion kilometers. If they remained concealed without making any noise, they could continue to hide, but once they took action, detection would be inevitable. At this moment, the main base of the Southern Civilization Fleet was holding another meeting led by Fleet Commander Lu Went, alongside military leader He Zhan and Speaker Bing Yantian. They were discussing recent war developments and arranging strategies for the future situation. Recently, their side had suffered significant casualties and there was a slight shortage in material supplies, necessitating increased support from the rear. Lu Went clearly articulated the detailed reserves and consumption rates. After completing a segment of the report, he closed his mouth and waited for responses from his superiors. However, both seemed to be in silence. Lu Went was somewhat surprised and lifted his gaze to the screen, only to find that the images of the two had frozen, maintaining their appearance from a few minutes prior. Is it stuck? Lu Went thought incredulously. Such issues might occur in places with poor communication conditions, but they were currently using military lines. Could they also be experiencing a malfunction? Come here. What's going on with the network? Where's the fault? Investigate and resolve it immediately. The communications officer was dispatched. However, just a few minutes later, the officer rushed back in a hurry. Commander, we have lost communication with the home civilization and cannot restore it. The Communications Technology Department has ruled out other possibilities. The only explanation is that our communication relay stations have been eliminated. All of them. Lu Wentai was taken aback, and then immediately furious. How is this possible? Chapter 173, Full Alert. This is simply absurd. This war has been going on for hundreds of years, and both sides have exhausted every means to defeat each other, leaving no stone unturned. Yet, despite this, neither side has ever thought of destroying the other's communication links. Why? Because it was deemed impossible. Now, you tell me our communication links have been cut off. Faced with the furious Lu Wentai, the communications officer trembled all over but still desperately shouted, Commander, this is the only possibility. Yes, our communications have been severed. Lu Wentai still found it hard to believe. He personally went to the headquarters communication management base to inspect the situation. Although he was not a technical expert, as the commander, he had a certain understanding of communication technology. At this moment, looking at the hard data and fault codes, he stood there in a daze, feeling an icy chill deep within. How could this be? How could it be like this? At this moment, even someone as mentally resilient as he was couldn't help but feel a hint of despair. Once the communication links were cut off, there would be no way to communicate internally or externally. How could they receive the supplies they needed? How could they know the changes in the outside situation? How could they gather intelligence? This almost meant that they were at an absolute disadvantage. But this was actually a minor issue. The bigger concern was, if the enemy could do this, severing their communication links, then how much hidden strength did the enemy still possess? What terrifying plans did they have? Could they withstand it? Suddenly, Lu Wentai jolted and immediately shouted, Consolidate defenses, immediately consolidate defenses. All fleets that are not in combat status, return to the nearest base and prepare for further orders. Those in combat must find a way to disengage immediately. If it's impossible to disengage, report to me at once and await orders. Hurry, hurry. Relay the orders immediately. At this moment, the entire command center of the South Star Civilization Expedition Fleet was thrown into chaos, with a flurry of activity. Emergency orders were transmitted, and all fleets began urgent maneuvers, creating a tense atmosphere. The 5th Division of the 8th Fleet of the expedition was currently engaged in fierce combat with an enemy fleet. Suddenly receiving the order to return, the commander was initially stunned, then filled with bitterness. The urgency of the command made him realize that something significant must have occurred. If they could not disengage from battle and return to base quickly, something extremely terrible was likely to happen. However, at this moment, the battle was at its most intense, with both sides' warships entangled and the situation exceedingly chaotic. They could barely cope with full effort, and once they retreated, their formation would collapse, coordination would falter, and they would likely face total annihilation. In such a situation, how could they disengage from combat? Was today the day that fate was against him? The commander murmured, his face pale as ash, and after a long moment, he slowly mustered his spirits. No matter how difficult the situation, they had to act. Given the current circumstances, they could only slowly gather their formation, first coming together before deciding what to do next. To his surprise, while his side was retracting its formation in an attempt to disengage from the battle, the opposing side did not take the opportunity to press the attack. Instead, they also began to retract their formation. The commander was overjoyed and even attempted to hasten the retraction process a bit. As expected, the enemy followed suit and accelerated their own retraction, showing no intent to attack. It seemed that fortune was on his side today. The commander was relieved and hurriedly ordered the fleet to retreat. He had been prepared for the enemy to take this chance to launch an offensive and target several of his ships. But he did not anticipate that the enemy was also retreating with all their might, and even faster than his own fleet, showing no signs of aggression. Filled with confusion, the 5th Fleet returned to base and immediately began to prepare for defense. The once noisy Wangliang star system suddenly quieted down. akin to a school study room from the Earth era falling silent the moment a teacher walked in at an unimaginable speed. Both sides retracted their fleets, firmly defending their bases and going all out to be on high alert. At this moment, at the Communication Management Base, under the direct supervision of Lu Went, the Communication Management Department was working tirelessly to study the situation. Commander, we have determined that the communication link disruption occurred at a distance of 0.2 light-years from us. However, we are unclear how much farther it extends. Our maximum communication range is 0.1 light-years, which indicates that the disruption length is at least 0.1 light-years. If the disruption length is 0.1 light-years, we can complete the communication link repair in about a year. If it's 0.2 light-years, it will take 2 years. If it's 0.3 light-years, it will require 4 years. As the disruption length increases, the repair time will rise exponentially. Immediately develop a repair plan. Start with the assumption of 0.1 light-years. If that doesn't work, continue to increase the length. In any case, we must do everything possible to repair the communication link. At all costs. Yes, a similar situation was unfolding at the headquarters of the Blue Moon Civilization Expeditionary Force. At this moment, both sides were on high alert, neither daring to act rashly, and both were making every effort to attempt to repair the communication link. Meanwhile, in the Gliese 393 star system, chaos ensued among the Black War and Blue Sky factions, as well as the two major civilizations, Ice Cloud Heaven and Blue Lightning. The disruption of the communication link was utterly astonishing and completely unexpected. In no time, countless long-range telescopes were aimed at the Wangliang star system. However, due to the vast distance, only macro-level details could be discerned, with no visibility of finer points. In the Hall of Peace, both negotiation teams began more intensive interactions. Although they were all extremely anxious internally, they maintained a facade of confidence, probing each other to ascertain whether the disruption of the communication link was indeed caused by the other side, and if so, what means were employed. Could it be that the other party had truly mastered some form of advanced technology? The situation between the two major civilizations was fraught with uncertainty, with countless undercurrents surging beneath the surface. Under such circumstances, Chunyu's fleet has accelerated to a speed of 1,000 kilometers per second. At this speed and acceleration, it will take no more than half a year for Chunyu's fleet to reach the core of the galaxy. As expected, under Chunyu's reckless acceleration, the existence of the human fleet was soon detected by the observational forces of two major civilizations at the galaxy's core. Commander, a fleet is approaching us. It's moving fast. It will arrive in about 6 months. Chapter 174, Hotline What? An alien fleet? What fleet? Where is it from? The command centers of the Southern Star Civilization Expeditionary Force and the Blue Moon Civilization received reports from their subordinates almost simultaneously. At that moment, both top battlefield commanders were struck with astonishment. Upon seeing further detailed information, their shock only deepened. A fleet of over 100,000 warships, with a complete range of large, medium, and small vessels. An acceleration of several hundred meters per square second. Could it be an unmanned fleet? If it were a manned fleet, what kind of intelligent life could withstand such immense overload pressure? But if it were an unmanned fleet, how could there be so many as over 100,000 unmanned ships? This fleet carried too many mysteries, leaving both commanders with countless questions. However, none of that was the main focus at this moment. The key point was that the appearance of this fleet undoubtedly revealed a stark reality. There truly exists a third-party force hidden within the Wangliang Trinary system. This fleet had probably been lurking about 100 billion kilometers from the galaxy's core for quite some time. They must have stealthily approached, employing certain covert methods during their maneuvering process, such as altering their jet direction and reducing thrust power. Otherwise, even from such a great distance, they would have been detected in advance, rather than being completely unaware as they are now. This also implied that the opposing side must have a wealth of information about their own forces, while they had no knowledge of the opposition. At the same time, both Hongshan and Lu Went were subconsciously reminded of events from over a decade ago. Back then, both sides had ceased hostilities and decided to resolve their sovereignty disputes over the Wangliang Trinary system through peaceful negotiations. However, due to a series of events, they ended up going to war again, suffering heavy losses on both sides. Could it be that those events were orchestrated by this third-party force? Were they secretly inciting war between them? And judging by the situation of the Blue Moon and Southern Star civilizations, after their communication links were severed, they too chose to retreat, suggesting that their communication links might have been cut as well. If neither side was responsible for this, could it be that the severing of communication links was also the doing of this fleet? What were they plotting? What were they planning? After lurking and observing for so long, what were their true intentions? A chilling sense of dread enveloped both Hongshan and Lu Went's bodies and minds. As the highest commanders of the expeditionary force, both possessed exceptional judgment and discernment. At that moment, They simultaneously realized that it was time for them to have a serious discussion with their old adversary. To the secure room, Lu Went made a decisive decision. In the secure room, there was a hotline that could directly contact the opposing commander. Of course, this hotline had been dormant for more than a decade. Now, Lu Went decided to reactivate it. Just as he arrived in the secure room and had not yet had the chance to order the communicator to send a communication request to the Blue Moon civilization. A communication request from the Blue Moon civilization arrived first, as if it knew that Lu Went was in the secure room at that moment. Lu Went remained silent, directly sitting at the communication station and pressing the connect button. On the screen appeared the figure of his old rival, Hong Shan, the commander of the Blue Moon civilization. He was also sitting in the communication room, with a tall and slender body and a long face that betrayed a seriousness even he could perceive. Without any pleasantries or small talk, Hong Shan spoke directly. A large number of flashes have appeared about 100 billion kilometers away, likely from a third-party fleet, consisting of over 100,000 warships. You are aware of this matter in your civilization, right? His voice was automatically translated into the language of the Southern Star civilization. Reaching Lu Went's ears, Lu Went snorted. The technological levels of our two civilizations are similar. If you detected it, we certainly did as well. His voice was also automatically translated into the language of the Blue Moon civilization. I suspect this fleet is provoking conflict between us. Let's verify this. All right. The two pondered for a moment and quickly determined the root cause of the events from their respective perspectives. 10 years ago, was it you who launched a surprise attack on our Yunguang-class space carrier? Lu Wen asked. A look of surprise appeared on Hong Shan's face. How could we possibly know your secrets? At that time, both sides were about to engage in peace negotiations, and we had great sincerity. How could we attack your space carrier? This matter has nothing to do with us. What I want to ask is, 10 years ago, was it you who attacked our 2512 logistics support base? Lu Wen also showed a hint of surprise. Your logistics support base was hidden so deep that we couldn't detect it no matter how hard we tried. How could we have launched a surprise attack? This is not our responsibility. Regarding the attack and destruction of our Yunguang-class space carrier, our judgment at the time was that your side took military action to gain an advantage at the negotiation table. Hong Shan said solemnly. Regarding the attack and destruction of our logistics support base, our judgment aligns with yours. After speaking, both fell silent. In that instant, they realized the true reason behind the strange attitude of the opposing negotiation team during that period in the Gliese 393 star system. It turned out that both sides had been completely unaware and had been unfairly blamed. With a high level of strategic judgment and discernment, both chose to trust each other's words. Lu Wen continued. 10 years ago, when our material transfer base was attacked, that was certainly your doing, right? At that time, we recovered wreckage of your warships and biological remains. To this, Hong Shan directly admitted. Indeed, it was our action. However, this military operation was a retaliatory measure against your surprise attack on our transport ships. We believe that we cannot allow you to continue down the wrong path of military adventures, so there must be reciprocal retaliation. Lu Wentian shook his head. We did not launch a surprise attack on your transport ship. Hong Shan snorted coldly. It's pointless not to admit it at this point. We have seized the wreckage of your warship and biological remains. How could that be fake? It was precisely for this reason that we dismissed our own speculation about the presence of third-party forces within the Wangliang 3-star system. Lu Wentian's expression froze for a moment, then gradually became serious. Can you show me your spoils? The wreckage and biological remains, preferably with genetic data. Wait a moment, Hong Shan ordered, and the relevant data was immediately sent over. Hong Shan directly forwarded it to Lu Wentian. Lu Wentian gathered his staff and secretaries to carefully analyze the wreckage. After a moment, he gritted his teeth. These wreckage and biological remains, along with the genetic data, indeed belong to us. But these warships and soldiers are all from the original Yunguang-class aerospace carrier fleet. Chapter 175. Alliance. At this moment, two highly cultivated and emotionally restrained supreme commanders, who held significant positions in their respective civilizations, simultaneously unleashed the most venomous curses from within their cultures. The Yunguang-class aerospace carrier fleet had been ambushed and destroyed, and then their warships and soldiers had actually gone on to attack the transport ships of the Blue Moon civilization. What could this mean? Is it necessary to guess? It must have been done by that third-party fleet. Despicable. We have been deceived for so long, made to look like fools. What was supposed to be a peaceful negotiation had been disrupted by this fleet that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, completely ruining our favorable situation. At this moment, the two commanders, having chosen to trust each other and clarify the truth, felt their anger and hatred surging to unprecedented heights. It was infuriating that both sides had been in a state of mutual suspicion, unable to communicate openly, which led to this major blunder. What has a decade of fierce fighting, where everything was used to try to annihilate the other side, brought us? 10 years ago, When we were preparing for peace negotiations, our combined total of warships still numbered 780,000. After 10 years of war, our total number of warships has dwindled to just 380,000. A full 400,000 warships have been destroyed in this decade of war. Lu Wentian was not clear on the exact casualties of the Blue Moon civilization, but he knew that his own fleet had lost 56 million elite soldiers. At this moment, Lu Wentian's heart was bleeding. On the screen, the Blue Moon civilization's commander, Hong Shan, was also gritting his teeth, his eyes turning blue. The Blue Moon people's eyes were originally black, only turning blue in extreme anger. Lu Wentian was well aware of this. 20,000 ships of various types, and a staggering 56 million elite warriors. Lu Went trembled as he spoke. On the screen, Hong Shan murmured similarly. 180,000 ships of various types, and as many as 902 million elite warriors. They also have parents, relatives, and friends. They should have had fulfilling lives, but now, they are all buried in the distant Wangliang star system. Reflecting on the 10-year war, the emergence of numerous battle heroes and countless inspiring heroic tales, the moments of turning the tide and fierce struggles,